The crazy news stories from 2001 that vanished overnight because of September 11th. The FBI caught a pharmacist who had spent decades diluting chemo meds for cancer patients. Truly a twisted and vile thing to do. It was on the cusp of breaking national headlines when the agent in charge was set to meet with the director of the FBI. On the morning of September, well, yeah, you've guessed it. There's a podcast that tells the story. It's called American Greed. This guy was Robert Courtney, and he underdosed thousands of doses. The nurses were the ones who noticed the patients getting chemo bags from this one specialty pharmacy just didn't get the crazy side effects, and they were getting zero benefits either. Good nurses who actually pay attention to their intuition. You know, the ones routinely crushed in real life by everyone, even though nurse intuition has been clinically proven to be a thing. They save so many lives. They caught the Green River Killer, the most prolific serial killer in the USA, a few weeks after. If Sep 11th hadn't happened, I believe this would have been the major news event of the year. He killed for decades. The family of a victim in my hometown was set to go on, I think it was 2020? It was some nationally syndicated program. They were going to get a chance to get attention on their daughter's case. It was set the same week as the terror attack. They never did go on TV about it at all. It was discovered that the McDonald's Monopoly game had been rigged by an insider for years, and all the largest prizes were funneled to his personal friends, as well as the Gambino crime family. The trial for this fraud started on September 10th, 2001, so pretty much all news coverage was overshadowed the next day. The worst part was that there were next to zero consequences for everyone involved, including the mastermind who basically stole $20 million with a slap on the wrist. He also single-handedly destroyed an advertising company employing hundreds of people, and although he's technically on the hook for restitution, he's only required to pay a pittance back every year while living in his comfortable home, free to do whatever he wants. On Sunday the 9th of September 2001, 60 Minutes aired an interview with Anne Heche in which she proclaimed her ability to communicate telepathically with faraway space aliens, or maybe interdimensional beings, I don't remember the details. It was the main focus of every late-night show's monologue on Monday. Never mentioned again by Tuesday for obvious reasons. We're going to come across a lot of comments either claiming that the entire world was on a slow news day due to stories like this, or that a lot of really important stuff was going under the radar, like a couple of the earlier comments. Like it or hate it, I kind of find myself longing for the days where absolutely silly stuff like this was the norm on the news. It's just overwhelming these days. The killing of Henryk Siwiak, a person who was murdered in New York City on September 11th. Not properly investigated because law enforcement was diverted to the terror attacks. The only reported homicide on that day as well. The massacre of the royal family of Nepal, and then Nepal abolished monarchy in 2006. Just a few weeks after the attacks on September 11th, a passenger aircraft crashed in suburban Queens, New York, killing 260 people on board. This event coincided with the aftermath, so naturally people assumed it was a second wave of attacks. What's interesting about this is that after that plane or helicopter crash earlier this year in DC, it was labeled the worst US commercial airline crash since 2001. So many people who I've talked to think it's referring to September 11th, but it's actually referring to the crash that you've just mentioned. The day before that fateful day, George Carlin taped a comedy special titled, "I Kinda Like It When a Lot of People Die." It never saw the light of day. Michael Jackson gave 2 shows in New York together with his brothers. That was on September 7th and on September 10th. That's why I was in New York on the day of the attack. And on the 15th, I had to board a plane to get back home to Germany. I went to the show on the 7th. I feel like that was the end of the 90s. Everything changed after. Thankfully, they recorded the concerts. Most of us paid no attention to the Summer of Sharks. The 24-hour news channels were so bored before September 11th that they went into live team coverage anytime a shark was spotted remotely near the coast. My wife died a couple of weeks earlier. Not really big news to most people, but that was some crazy crap for me. And her, I guess. I can't imagine going through something that huge while everyone else is just focused on something else. I'm so sorry. Similarly, my mom's husband died just as COVID was ramping up. After a couple of years of trying to hold a memorial service, she decided too much time had passed for anyone to want to show up. In November, a passenger aircraft with 260 people aboard crashed into a neighborhood in Queens and killed numerous people on the ground. It was the second deadliest accidental plane crash in US history and caused evacuations from office towers in Manhattan. But when it transpired that it was not a terror attack, it fell out of the news and was largely forgotten. The release of the Segway. I'm mostly kidding, but I remember how it was hyped as a mysterious invention that would revolutionize transportation forever. And college friends of mine actually got up early for the news conference about what it was. A perpetual motion machine? Flying cars? Only to find out that it was, in fact, a scooter. Nobody outside of my locality knew about it, but the day after the event, my elementary school had an explosive threat so severe that they walked us to a church half a mile away and asked our parents to come get us. On the very same morning, the Concorde made its first flight with passengers since being grounded the year before. Commercial flights would resume a couple of months later, but it was doomed. There was a slump in air travel, and supposedly a significant number of Concorde customers died in the World Trade Center. The Concorde was a good idea that was doomed to fail from the start. If it hadn't been for September 11th, it would have been something else. Having a plane that goes faster than commercial jets is a great idea. That idea becomes less great when the maintenance is more costly than flying and you can't fly the damn thing anywhere because it's so loud. The 2001 crisis in Argentina was an economic, social, and political catastrophe caused by unsustainable external debt, a collapsed convertibility model, and years of corruption and adjustment. It ended with the country in default, the famous Corralito that blocked savings, and looting, repression, and 5 presidents in less than 2 weeks. I was 4 years old and it was my mother's birthday. People were crying because their homes and workplaces were being looted. People were standing guard on roofs of houses with weapons. In the UK, a government communications advisor got into a lot of trouble specifically for sending an email on September 11th suggesting that it was a good day to bury bad news, if there was anything that needed to be announced but the government didn't really want people to pay attention to. I mean, she was right, but unfortunately it got leaked and it did look pretty insensitive. The Chandra Levy disappearance and ensuing media circus around Gary Condit. Locally, there was a pretty decent-sized earthquake on the evening of September 11th under Beverly Hills. There was an enormous industrial accident in France that was thought to be a terror attack at the time. They put down what's-his-frickin'-face for the Oklahoma City bombings? Oh, Timothy McVeigh, the original OK Boomer. ALIA died in a plane crash just a couple of weeks prior. She was only 22. Also infuriating given it was a completely preventable death. They overloaded a tiny little twin-engine plane with too much audio equipment. Plus, wasn't one of her bodyguards, a really massive guy like 300 pounds upwards, also on the plane? The coughing major was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire UK and won the game 2 days before September 11th. Paula Poundstone was arrested for alleged lewd acts and some pretty awful stuff we can't say in this video, which was overlooked because of September 11th. In Texas, a few days after September 11th, a barge hit the Queen Isabella Bridge on South Padre Island and knocked down a section of the bridge. 8 people died. The news was mostly confined to local area news. Any other week, this would have been front-page news. In those first few days, all networks were covering September 11th 24/7. As I recall on our news, it was 20 seconds. Oh, and by the way, a barge hit a bridge in Texas and 8 people have died. 6 million cows and sheep were slaughtered and burned in the UK due to the foot-and-mouth epidemic. The Forrest Gump sequel is about to be greenlit, but then September 11th happened and they never revived the project because it seemed too messed up to do so. Dude, have you heard them talking about the script and what would have happened in the story? It's better that that thing was left unmade. If I recall correctly, the author of the original book hated the movie and purposefully made the sequel as weird as possible as a way to get back at it, and got the studio to pay upfront for the movie rights on an unfilmable mess. Because he didn't just hate the movie, he was also screwed over by the studio the first time around. Honestly, the narrator has just done a quick Google and amen to not ruining a classic movie with that sequel. Jenny comes back as a ghost, Forrest catches the leader of Iraq at the time, and watches and hates the first Forrest Gump movie. Also dances with Princess Diana. I'm pretty sure the British public would have been stirred to war by that last part. Metal Gear Solid predicted social media and its effects on politics and society at large. A quote from the game, "Everyone withdraws into their own small gated community, afraid of a larger forum. They stay inside their little ponds, leaking whatever truth suits them into the growing cesspool of society at large. The different cardinal truths neither clash nor mesh. No one's invalidated, but nobody's right. Not even natural selection can take place here. The world is being engulfed in truth. And this is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper." Pretty accurately reflects the mess we're in today, and this is before Facebook or even MySpace existed. My childhood friend's birthday is on that fateful day, so that had to suck for him going forward. My ex has her birthday on that date, but she was born before. At least her childhood was unaffected. Today, people don't make anything out of it. For the few years after, it was probably weird. The anthrax attacks of the same year. God, I still remember the panic after that. For some reason, parents everywhere in America were absolutely convinced anthrax was just going to show up in our Halloween candy after all that. I got a weird rash on my legs a few days after receiving a check from a client in New York City. When I went to the doctor, she didn't even blink and AITA magically put me on Cipro. The Enron collapse is well known, but its effects were unrealized back then. They cooked the books by putting a lot of their negative accounts in international banks, not so easily seen by financial review boards like Arthur Andersen. They claim everything's fine. Employees who were also stockholders knew inside that it was not. The selling of stocks, collapse of a major corporation, through the actions of stockholders who knew better what was going on, it's all still seen today. And corporations now bow down more to stockholders than customers or their own employees as a result. Not long before that date, the drunk-driving NYPD cop that killed a whole bunch of people. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? In Seattle, a woman climbed up on the railing of a ship canal bridge contemplating self-deletion. Onlookers who were ticked off by the resulting traffic jam told her to jump, which she did. She somehow survived the impact, and in the days following, the city was forced to take a look in the mirror. A few "What has our city become?" articles were published, but then September 11th happened. To this day, I do not know what became of the jumper. Air Transat Flight 236 happened just a few weeks before September 11th and is one of the most incredible aviation incidents ever. It was an Airbus A330 flying from Toronto to Lisbon that ran out of fuel over the Atlantic Ocean due to a massive fuel leak caused by improper maintenance. The pilots managed to glide the plane for over 75 miles, about 20 minutes, with no engines and safely landed at a military base in the Azores. All 306 people on board survived. It was the longest successful glide of a commercial jetliner in history. On September 11th, during the news broadcasts, I remember a news ticker at the bottom specifically calling out that the band Anthrax was changing their name to Basketful of Puppies. It was actually a press release they put out, and in the paranoia there was limited thought, and someone saw the name Anthrax during a time of heightened terror attacks and put it right on the news sticker. I got my braces off on September 11th and nobody gave a crap. Real big day for me, I was just so excited. Dale Earnhardt died. This one's easy to overlook because it caused a lot of reviews to NASCAR safety standards and kind of transformed the sport, because at first glance it wasn't even that bad of a crash. George Harrison's death occurred 29th of November of the same year. It should have been huge news, but it ended as a footnote. In Canada, we had a few news stories. 2 weeks before the event, there was the tragic murder of a minor in London, Ontario. At home, that was the big news story just before September 11th. Unfortunately, locally, she didn't get forgotten. There was also the Walkerton tainted water inquiry, which was taking place at the time on the same date. This inquiry implicated Ontario Premier Mike Harris, who announced his resignation in early October 2001. A number of Canadian Alliance MPs called on leader Stockwell Day to resign. They broke from the party and formed their own caucus. This, along with the Walkerton inquiry, were probably the biggest news stories in Canada in the weeks leading up to September 11th. The death of Ernie Coombs, aka Mr. Dress-Up, just days before the event. Whilst mostly unknown outside of Canada, he's known for being a mentor to Mr. Rogers. They'd worked together on a children's show on the CBC before Mr. Rogers moved back to the US to start his own children's television program. I was working in a Staples at the time and used an AS400 system, Unix-based. Somehow I managed to change the entire store network address to Store Groovy rather than just my password. Needless to say, absolute chaos. Tills, VPN, phones, everything went down. No idea how I did it, but I royally effed everything up. The sales manager told me to sort it out before leaving for the day. He and I did not get on. I said, "You're the manager, manage." They tried to sack me but failed. That's my 2001 mayhem story. Slayer released God Hates Us All. On the same day, Dream Theater released a live album which oddly enough depicted the New York City skyline in flames, including the towers. Thoy Trang, who played the Yellow Power Ranger in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, passed away a week before the event. It was a car accident and she wasn't wearing her seatbelt, if I'm not mistaken. Some guy successfully got away with murder on the day because the police were too busy at Ground Zero to investigate the killing. The assault on Rainbow Farm happened the same day. A lot of people in this area are still teed off about it. A book was written about it titled Burning Rainbow Farm. Reports are that a movie's being made. Yeah, we're still mad. There's been a lot of interesting discoveries I've made looking up what happened in the background of this earth-shaking event, but we're starting to come up on our repeat answers now, so here's an interesting review of some things that slipped through the net in a very different sense. We missed all the warnings that it was coming. In fact, all the warnings that it was coming from as early as the Clinton years. In December 1998, the CIA's Counter-Terror Center reported to President Bill Clinton that AQ was preparing for attacks in the US that might include hijacking aircraft. In April 2001, Ahmad Shah Massoud, leader of the Northern Alliance, asked for humanitarian aid for the people of Afghanistan. Massoud told the European Parliament that his intelligence agents had gained limited knowledge about a large-scale terror attack on US soil being imminent. Massoud was then eliminated by AQ 2 days before the attacks. On the same day, Vladimir Putin called Bush and expressed his concerns over Massoud's assassination, warning him that something larger might be afoot. On May 1, 2001, the CIA informed the White House that a group presently in the United States was in the process of planning a terror attack. On June 13, 2001, the leader of the terror organization made a tape for supporters mentioning a possible attack on the G8 summit in Genoa, Italy. The plan was said to involve a plane packed with explosives being crashed into the summit to kill President Bush and other world leaders in attendance. The president's daily brief on June 29, 2001, stated that the United States is not the target of a disinformation campaign by AQ. The document repeated evidence surrounding the threat, including an interview that month with a Middle Eastern journalist in which the leader of AQ's aides warned of a coming attack, as well as competitive pressures that the terror leader was feeling, given the number of Islamists being recruited for the separatist Russian region of Chechnya. The CIA reiterated that the attacks were anticipated to be near-term and to have dramatic consequences. In July 2001, J. Cofer Black, the CIA's counter-terror chief, and George Tenet, the CIA's director, met with Condoleezza Rice to inform her about communications intercepts and other top-secret intelligence showing the increasing likelihood that AQ would soon attack the United States. Rice listened but was unconvinced, having other priorities on which to focus. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld questioned the information, suggesting it was deception meant to gauge the US response. On the same day, FBI Special Agent Kenneth Williams sent a letter to FBI headquarters warning of suspects connected to AQ who were attending flight schools in Arizona and demanding further investigation. This document is known as the Phoenix Memo. On August 6, 2001, the president's daily briefing, titled AQ Determined to Strike in US, warned that the leader was planning to exploit his operatives' access to the US to mount a strike. Rice responded to the claims about the briefing in a statement before the September 11th Commission, stating the brief was not prompted by any specific threat information and did not raise the possibility that the enemy might use airplanes as missiles. On 23rd of August 2001, the Mossad gave the CIA a list of 19 suspects living in the US who were believed to be mounting an imminent attack against the United States. Only 4 of the names are known, but all belonged to the eventual hijackers in the attacks. The head of the Algerian State Intelligence Service, DRS, General Mohammed Median, went to the US a few days before September 11th. He spoke of an imminent attack against the United States based on secret memos sent on September 6th by Smain Lamari, the number 2 in the DRS at the time. Shortly after the attacks, only 2 civilian planes were authorized to take off. The one carrying members of the Saudi royal family and people close to the leader of AQ, and the one bringing General Mohammed Median to Algiers. Honestly, the only crazy thing about the event is that it was allowed to happen at all. People talk about it being an inside job, but the reality is that Bush and co were just utterly frickin' useless at their jobs. The Chandra Levy-Gary Condit saga. This was on the news every night for many weeks prior to the day itself. Condit was dragged as a murderer and accused of covering it up. It was front page on all the papers and mags. After the 11th, it disappeared until they found her remains. There was also the disappearance of Sneha and Philip, who went missing technically the night before or morning of September 11th, although it's been believed that she may have died trying to help people at the towers. Her case wasn't as overshadowed though because her husband made an effort to bring the case to shows like Unsolved Mysteries at the time to try and find out the truth. The Patriot Act, one of the largest ever transfers of power from the people to the US government, and presidents on both sides of the aisle have been gleefully renewing it ever since. A politician in Cali was under suspicion for having to do with the disappearance of a much younger intern of his with whom he was having an affair. Rudy Giuliani was about to step down as mayor of New York because of all the corruption that he had been linked to. Then, by the end of the month, he was America's mayor. I got double-teamed in the restroom of a Blockbuster in Flint, Michigan. The Diamondbacks took down the Yankees in the World Series. You know why I hated those Terrifighters? They forced me not to cheer against the Yankees in the World Series. What a jerk move to do that to me. Ernie Coombs, Mr. Dress-Up for Canadians in the know, had a stroke and died a week after September 11th. 20,000 people died in an earthquake in India. The movie Spotlight tells the story of the investigative journalists from the Boston Globe newspaper who broke the story of the widespread scandal in the Catholic Church in the Boston area. This was one of the stories that really started the absolute avalanche of child mistreatment cases in the American Catholic Church in the 21st century. One of the big turning points in the movie is when they're about to break the story. Then September 11th happens. It's obviously a big national story, and one of the flights was from Logan Airport, so there's a Boston element to it. So this huge story that they had been investigating for months and months got put on hold. The herpetologist Joseph Slowinski died from a venomous snake bite in Myanmar that day. The US Embassy couldn't arrange transportation to the hospital because, well, they were busy with some other things. Slowinski apparently had a reputation for two things, by the way: his expertise with venomous snakes and his carelessness with them in the field.
What fact are you just tired of explaining to people? That I'm not lonely or sad, I just like to spend time by myself. That being deaf really means I can't hear you at all. All the shouting doesn't help me to hear you. The difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Any type of diet, plants, or hocus-pocus voodoo isn't going to cure my cancer. It's a chromosome switch, so unless they can switch my chromosomes back into the right places, it's not happening. That reminds me of how, Steve Jobs died. Apparently he was a real believer in alternative medicine, and then he, got a transplant of an organ or something that he needed, that he should have done at the very beginning, but then he wasted so much time on, alternative medicines that when he got the transplant, it just meant nothing. Correlation doesn't equal causation. I'm in IT. That does not mean I can single-handedly make a game or large-scale software. At the same time, I also cannot hack the Pentagon or release encrypted files from another hacker. Also, side note, while I was reinstalling Windows for you, I did not break your toaster and radio on opposite sides of the house and have no idea how to repair them or your microwave. Okay, thanks, bye. Going up a tax bracket doesn't result in a pay cut. That having the money to buy something doesn't mean you can afford it. Oh boy, is that a good one, and oh boy, is that one that I'd hear from my mama a lot when I wanted toys as a kid. As a speech and language therapist, I'm responsible for somebody's safe swallow to prevent aspiration, pneumonia, or choking. There is more to my profession than teaching a child to stop stuttering. Gifts must be reported to the IRS if they are over 17 grand. Gifts over 12.92 million in the giver's lifetime are taxable, and the giver has to pay the tax. They tax gifts to avoid rich people dodging estate taxes by giving everything away before they die. ADHD is real. Adults can have it too, and it's not cured by a belt, just trying or cutting back on caffeine and sugar. It's actually very debilitating at times and is the primary contributor to a lot of problems that adults with it struggle with. It's extremely hard to find the help you need past a certain age because even the medical industry has a terrible understanding of adult ADHD. And no, not everyone is a little bit ADHD. Parts of the brain are literally underdeveloped due to lagging behind while developing. It literally prevents me from being able to redirect my attention and tune out background noises. It makes my default mode network, the part of the brain that chatters when you are at rest not doing anything, incessantly chatter in my head all day, every day. It makes the part of my brain responsible for inhibiting emotions or thoughts extremely difficult. It's mentally exhausting. It prevents the part of my brain responsible for motivation from functioning correctly. It's not lazy. laziness. It's literally my brain not being able to communicate with itself properly to get me to take action. And yes, it literally affects my mood and my displays of emotions. It's not bipolar, I just can't regulate how I show normal emotions effectively. If I blow up at you and you make me angry, it's not anger problems. I literally can't hold myself back unless I am getting the help I need to manage the ADHD. And yes, that means stimulant substances for me. No, it's not an illegal substance. Yes, it functions similar to that, but it calms me down because I am chronically understimulated and my brain takes over seeking stimulation, hyperactivity, chatter, daydreaming, etc. Stimulants put me on even footing with everyone else. I likely try harder than you every day with everything I do because I start the race with my feet tied and a mile behind the starting line. So stop telling me that I just don't try hard enough. And please educate yourself. ADHD is the most well-researched and studied disorder on Earth, and too many people don't believe it exists. No, it wasn't invented in the 70s by a man who said he made it up. There are over 200-year-old medical journals detailing it. The grandfather of medicine, Hippocrates, has writings describing patients that are believed to be the earliest recorded instances of ADHD, and the treatment he gave them line up with herbs, vitamins, and minerals that tend to help ADHD the most. And that's from the 4th century BC. It's not a made-up problem from 50 years ago.
That all checks out. I've got ADHD. It does suck some days, but it also affects people wildly differently.
That awful poor planning on their part does not constitute an emergency on mine. That most recycling ends up in the landfill. You are not being environmentally friendly just because you recycle. Reducing and reusing are much, much better for the environment. Recycling is the last resort. Only one small step up from garbage. The importance of privacy, why governments and companies should not spy on us unless when the people whose data is stolen are not citizens of their country. And together with the above, not because someone posts things on the internet and has a public life, does it give others the right to interfere in their private life. That just because I'm black does not mean that I'm an expert or the go-to guy on all things African American. Seriously. Along those lines, I can like a woman who's not black because of qualities she has that have nothing to do with her skin color or ethnic background, or not like a black woman because of the same things. If she's from Mumbai and would actually listen to me argue with someone why Professor X could use his mental blast to take out a Mark II Sentinel and get me another beer instead of head for the door, why does it matter what her hair color is or where her people are from? She likes me enough to put up with my BS. Why should I look for someone that you think I should be with to make you happy with who should be with whom? Just saying.
This sounds like a rather personal matter. I'm sorry that your mother is maybe racist and unable to see that you've maybe made a actual connection with someone.
I'm not Chinese. I don't speak Vietnamese or Chinese. Yes, I'm Irish. 18 years of reinforced go to college and you'll get a good job growing up has led to an entire generation of adults who are on average more educated than prior generations when the number of jobs that would actually require those educations have not really increased in any significant number. So now, more roles that don't actually need the education can still ask for it and get candidates with that education requirement applying because they can't get anything else. Add on the fact that tuition rates have been increasing at a much higher rate than inflation since at least the 80s, while Uncle Sam happily foots the upfront costs and you wind up with a generation of people with significant debt making less than their expected income that can't afford to pay it off. Don't forget to add in that public schools don't, or at least didn't about 15 years ago when I graduated, have any mandatory classes to teach about loans in general, student loans, interest, etc. So kids signed up for these loans with only a very vague idea of what they were signing up for. And finally, even if Biden's debt forgiveness passes, which I hope it does, as it will definitely help people, it will still do nothing to address the underlying issue and actually solve any problem. It will just put a band-aid over the issue for another year.
Now, I by no means have a horse in the American political race, and you're the one who brought it up, but I just thought I'd ask. How's Vote Blue no matter who working out for you?
That you are responsible for your own actions. Just because something offends you doesn't mean it's gotta go. The McDonald's coffee lawsuit lady was very justified in winning her case. Longitude and latitude and GPS and how it simply would not work if the earth was flat.
That you don't have to be white to be racist. There are non-white racists too. To add to that, 1, there's no reverse racism, it's just racism. And 2, just because you're black doesn't mean you're not racist towards black people. That's literally the point of characters like Uncle Ruckus.
Stop setting yourself up for failure because you demand perfection. Actually accomplishing something to a B+ level is infinitely better than having not done it. Can't clean the kitchen until it's spotless under a microscope? Cool. Load up the dishwasher until it's full and run it. Way better than living in and filth. Can't stick to a 5-day-a-week workout and super healthy diet? Fine. Do twice a week and cut out the 3 worst foods and you'll be massively ahead of where you were.
Basically, incremental improvements in your life will eventually lead to larger-scale improvements in your life. I once heard that apparently you need to stick to something for about 30 days in a row before you just start doing it automatically with ease. The vast majority of religious believers cringe just as hard as you do and wish the loud extremist minority would go away and shut up just like you. It's a shame that so many people assume first which religion and second that these discussions don't already take place within the communities of these religions. They do. The difference is neither side is smart enough to realize that screaming your belief into others' faces will never actually work. It only makes you the savage you think you are disagreeing with. And it really sucks that I need to extrapolate on this, because people still want to assume the worst and shout their beliefs into another's face. I mean, there are morally reprehensible people in any kind of group you can name, social, religious, whatever, but the fact of the matter is, the world would be a whole lot better if people would just come out and say, yes, there are morally reprehensible people in our groups and we all need to work together to call those people out and hopefully make the world a better place, and we can all maybe learn to tolerate each other just a little bit more than we have been lately. Censoring speech is the first step towards oppression of all society. That unlikely things do happen, such as people getting lucky or someone bragging about something unique. It appears as if lots of people stubbornly live under a rock and refuse to accept the fact that everyone has a life of their own. The 8 billion people on this planet do not exist as carbon copies of your life. That you can disagree with someone and still be friends. You can also have different political beliefs and be friends. Opinions are not facts. That intention does not negate impact. That touching a baby animal won't make the parents reject it. It's an old wives' tale / myth to keep children from messing with wild baby animals. I still see so many people argue about this. I'm not sure if it is true or not. Some people say it is, some people say it isn't. I mean, the people that say it is true actually give examples. Feminism is equality and against bias towards genders. It doesn't mean to hate men. That is the opposite of the definition of feminism. I am Sikh, not Muslim. Those are your dog's nipples. Yes, male dogs have nipples. The laws of supply and demand apply to labor, so you can't import millions of people without driving wages down. Han shot first. It's been ages since I saw the original cut of Star Wars, and it's so weird that they change it with each iteration that they decide to pump out or whatever, but it makes him a more interesting character if he shoots first, rather than waiting to be attacked. Micro pigs aren't real. It's just a starved pot-belly pig. Gonna get buried, but just chipping in, there is a massive difference to listening and waiting your turn to talk. Most people are waiting for their turn to talk, interrupt soon as a thought comes into their mind, or only latch onto one small thing that they heard and ignore the rest. The worst people are those who just try to drown out your voice by talking louder than anyone else. Listening is a valuable skill. Please learn to listen. That innocent until proven guilty is a legal concept. It means while being tried in a court of law, the judge or jury need to be unbiased and believe the person is innocent until the burden of proof is met. It does not mean the person is actually innocent. If I see someone commit a crime, I don't have to say they are innocent until convicted. I know they did it. A person can absolutely be guilty, but the legal burden was not met. And again, that does not mean they should be treated as though they did not do it outside of the justice system.
Just because I'm old doesn't mean I'm out of touch. My son's trans and I've supported his transition. Also came out as bisexual at the age of 58. A lot of us old folks want to see the change you kids are going to make in the world.
Politics isn't simple like you think it is. There are no simple answers. That all dating apps are designed to get money from you and that they don't care if you find anyone. They prey on those who are weak, who think spending money will help them find dates. Dating apps have ruined people's self-esteem and dating in general. It's true, a large swath of society needs to readjust and, try and take part in actual human contact to find partners again. If you regularly use dating apps, that's fine, but honestly, it doesn't really prepare you for, conversational skills in person or anything like that, which are very, very critical. Every generation has its share of greedy buttholes and grifters. Things aren't going to magically get better when the boomers all die. That the 2020 election was fair and not stolen. Electric cars won't save us from climate change, and we've been duped by car manufacturers. We need walkable cities yesterday.
That just because the research study reports a statistic does not mean it is generalizable to the entire population. Most research studies are done on a population in a given area. The area then are typically randomized to get a sample from that population. That means that if a researcher is doing a study and uses one specific country, state, job, place, or whatever, they are only studying that specific population, which implies that if you were to do that study on a different population in a different
different place, there could be very different results based on the different demographics of that specific population. For example, if you were to do a study on the average political beliefs of people in the southern states, you cannot imply that the results would be the same as the average political beliefs of people in the northern states. Most people who perform research or are knowledgeable and have taken a class in statistics are aware of this. However, I know many people who just raffle off a statistic that clearly supports their specific opinion or belief, without looking at all the other research that may have disproven that said finding, or they don't realize that the one statistic is only specific to one population.
Nuclear energy is a waste of time and a colossal waste of money.
Pollution from coal power kills more people every day than nuclear has in its entire history.
That life isn't a bunch of dichotomies and extremes. I can consider Donald Trump to be the worst president in U.S. history and still not vote for or even like Joe Biden. I can recognize that Maryland's SB 0001 is a dumb law and still not be a long-range killing device lover. I can prefer to eat my pizza without pineapples and still not think that pepperoni is the only acceptable pizza topping.
This is literally the best answer in this entire goddamn thread. My god, this topic is a bit of a down and I have to comment on every now and then because a lot of this stuff is just like opinion-based, or they're only saying 1 to maybe 8-word answers that I don't really want to extrapolate on. That anxiety is not just all in your head.
Yes, there is a damn rule that stops everybody from playing basketball, or more accurately, there's no rule that allows it, and basketball rules are a list of what you can do. Anything not included is prohibited.
The ducks at the park are free.
Because my dad is a math teacher doesn't make me automatically good at maths.
So, my name is Maurice, and ever since Madagascar came out, I keep having to explain to people that Mort is the one with the foot fetish, not Maurice. Your migraine headache is not a migraine. When I have a migraine, my head doesn't just hurt. My pupils dilate so uncontrollably, I effectively go blind, vomit uncontrollably, piercing neck pain, and occasionally I hallucinate. Yeah, I cannot stress enough how, different a migraine is to a headache. It's true. Frankenstein was the goddamn doctor! There is a difference between an excuse and an explanation. Also, that most times, effect carries more weight than intent. That first part, right? So I'll mess up in some way and I'll be like, yeah, totally my fault, I did this and that, and they'll be like, no, stop making excuses. What are you talking about? I'm taking the blame. I'm just explaining how it happened.
The phrase is, I couldn't care less.
Saying, I could care less opposes the point you are trying to make. That not every evergreen tree is a pine tree. Some of them are spruce, cedar, fir, or even tamaracks. Homeless and unhoused can't just get a job. There's so many factors that are unaddressed in that ignorance.
Atheism is not Satanism. If I don't believe in your imaginary friend, why would I believe in your imaginary enemy?
The left lane is for passing, not cruising.
The president doesn't control the gas prices.
That is absolutely true. And yet the decisions made by an incompetent, quote-unquote, leader of the free world can ripple and change the world exponentially. Frankly, I just wish it was never always down to some stupid two-party system.
I'm gay myself. I get stupid questions, like if I have ever tried being straight, or insecure women who think I want their men, or insecure men who think I want them, etc. Rinse and repeat. It's not the most interesting aspect of who I am. In fact, I don't think it's interesting at all. I can't decorate. I don't know crap about fashion. I'm just a regular guy who happens to occasionally date other guys. Currently single. I'm fine with that.
Now, just because the fact doesn't agree with your political statement doesn't make it any less true. Doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you are on. Just because I have ADHD doesn't mean I can't sit still for an extended period of time. ADHD affects different people differently. Well, it certainly makes it difficult for me to sit still for an extended period of time.
The Dark Side of the Moon is a Pink Floyd album. The moon no more has a dark side than the Earth does. It has days and nights, 2 weeks long. It does have a far side.
The entire medical profession, or at least the 98th percentile, misunderstands addiction. Alcoholism, gambling, sex, illegal substances, overeating, even religion. Any of them. Doesn't matter. The medical profession thinks the reason the patients are addicted is, number one, they don't understand the harm they're doing to their bodies and society. If we could just explain it to them, they'd stop. No, we understand. We're under siege with pamphlets, after-school specials, news programs, medical personnel telling us, plus a billion advertisements, MADD, and such on the harm it causes. Number 2, it's just a lack of willpower. No, it's not a lack of willpower. Lots of very high-functioning people in other aspects of their lives, heads of industry, CEOs of corporations, and very successful sports, football people also suffer from addiction. Number 3, they're living the dream already and just want to experiment to see how much better life can be. No, sorry, not that one either. Well, maybe if you're 16 to 18 and life is wonderful, that's true, but it's not true for anyone over 30 to 90 years old. For most of the people with addiction problems, life sucks beyond the imagining, and they just want to have the tiniest bit of control to dull the pain to a manageable level. Dr. Sarah.
Bob, I've explained all the advantages and disadvantages to you. I really think you ought to agree to the skin grafts to fix your burns. Do you not understand the harm that could happen if we don't deal with this? Do you not have the willpower to survive the operation and recovery?
Bob. No, Dr. Sarah, that's not my problem. My problem is that I still live in the house and the frickin' house is still on fire. If we go through the pain and expense of the skin graft, 5 minutes later, I'll be right back in the same circumstances that put me here in the first place. And if by some miracle you can convince Dr. Sarah that your life won't ever change to get you out of the fire, they fall back on the,
well, then why are you whining about it? Why don't you do something to get out of the fire?
Because, Dr. Sarah, my grandfather has Alzheimer's, my mother has stage 4 inoperable pancreatic cancer, my son, little Timmy, is severely autistic, and daughter, Betty Sue, has incurable Parkinson's. Which of those 4 problems can you fix for me, Doc, to reduce the stress and pain in my life to a manageable level? The entire medical profession doesn't understand that addiction isn't about the thing you're addicted to or the effect it has on you or other people's lives. It's usually about medicating unsolvable problems to a bearable level, and until everyone understands the problem, we have no hope of solving it. Why forums like these make me really angry when they just become a moan fest for people with insecurities, faux depression, and other mental disorders they want the whole world to know about. This person is totally right, but, everyone needs some method of getting their frustrations out. Both political parties in the US are just as corrupt and self-serving. Most, if not all, high-ranking politicians have lost touch with what it is to be the average human being. They pander to us, put us against each other, and pretend the other party is the enemy and they truly want to make life better for us. They don't give a crap about us. They think they're royalty and we're all peasants. When American politics comes up, I always think about the Stampy the Elephant episode of The Simpsons where it goes on a rampage and it goes to the Republic Convention Center and there are banners hung up all saying, "We want what's worse for everyone. We're just plain evil." And then it goes to the Democrat Convention Center and it says, "We hate life and ourselves and we can't govern." This one was honestly so hard to goddamn sift through because it was all just political opinions or people complaining about their chronic health issues. Like I was hoping for more like scientific facts or myths and stuff that people come up with.
Reddit, what did your parents teach you that you had to unlearn? Well, my grandpa told me that soda evaporates quickly, as in half the can in 20 minutes, when I was around 6. Took me like 10 years to realize he's been drinking my soda when my back is turned. I always drank my soda fast when outside or in hot places because of it. Wanting anything is selfish. Learning to undo this train of thought is the greatest feat of my life. It's still hard for me to attempt for first place in any form of competition. I always feel that someone else is more deserving, so I don't give it my all. If I do win, I'm always certain it was a fluke. This applies to my relationships in the worst way, too. I have a hard time dating because I'm convinced that if I date them, I would be taking them off the market and someone more deserving would be losing out. Or how I have a strong desire to be dominant in the bedroom, but I'm constantly guilting myself for wanting these things, so I either submit or beat around the bush. It doesn't matter what I want. I am undeserving, and to achieve is selfish and wrong. Screw that thought process. My mother told me that I had another middle name one day, Aloysius. I hated it, of course, but eventually came to terms with the idea. It was years later that she realized I had been writing an extra middle name on literally everything that required my full name, and asked me why I was doing such an odd thing. She had forgotten what she had done. When I told her, she laughed at me for about an hour straight, tears rolling down her face, laughing so hard she peed herself. Yeah, thanks. She taught me capsicum seeds were poisonous. They aren't. She really believes this one though. Edit, yeah, I misspelled the name. You should have seen how I spelled it when I was 7. My grandfather thought it was hilarious to threaten me with renaming. He swore he would get my dad to change my name to Wolfgang Helmut IV if I misbehaved. I believed it wholeheartedly. Nobody in my family was ever named Wolfgang Helmut, and I am female. Could you imagine introducing yourself like that to people, though? You would have every right to put on the worst British accent you could and go, "Yes, hello, my name is Wolfgang Helmut IV. Charmed to meet you." My mother is convinced all clothes are too tight unless they are falling off of you. I looked like a ragamuffin for years until my rich sister-in-law pulled me aside and went, "Sweetie, I'm gonna take you shopping before you ever have to attend any job interviews looking like that." What food tastes like. Chicken is not supposed to be tough, dry, and chewy. Steak is not usually chewy, flat, and gray. There are more seasonings available than salt and pepper. Once I taught myself to cook, the world just opened up with new flavors and foods. It was the best. I personally resonate with this one because I love cooking and I wanted to broaden my horizons beyond just Southern American food where I grew up and eating out of a paper bag every weekend as a treat. Once you open that door to a new culinary world, trust me, you'll want to try everything. To be a bystander, for lack of a better term, my parents are very against me standing up for others and even myself in some cases, and I had to learn that standing up for other people is the right thing to do. Also, how to pronounce cucumbers. For those of you wondering, they pronounced it cucumbers. Quantity over quality. Though my family was economically stable, privileged even, my parents grew up in poverty. So their way of buying was to buy cheap, which definitely should be taken into consideration, but ultimately, if the quality is not there, you end up spending more to continuously replace the item. We could afford to buy things of better quality that would last longer, but that's just not how they grew up. It still hurts me to spill $60 on a nice pair of shoes that will last more than a year, but I have since learned that I would much rather spend $60 this one time rather than getting 3 pairs of $20 crappy no-brand shoes that hurt my feet and fall apart every few months. That the garbage disposal will not trigger a nuclear reaction and blow up half the world within 5 seconds of being turned on without cold water running. That was a tough one to unlearn. I don't know, man. The way my dog reacts to it, I think it's gonna blow up. That you don't have to marry everyone you date. My mom was married 7 times and taught us that you never left anyone, no matter if they were horrible to you, took all your money, and treated your kids like crap. And that you could, quote, fix them if you married them. It took me a moving out and talking with other people to learn that is not normal and people break up all the time. Luckily, I never married any of those guys. They taught me to never disagree with anything. In my household, there was no such thing as no or why. Whoa, didn't expect this much of a response from the Reddit community. Thanks for the gold, strangers. I'm glad a lot of you are starting to be able to get over this bad programming and speak up if you disagree with something. Most parents want the best for you, and they do try their best, but they don't get everything right. Pretty much the same. My dad was abusive, and we all sort of just agreed with everything, because disagreeing or questioning anything led to yelling and throwing things and tantrums that lasted days. I grew up learning that the safest way to live was entirely unnoticed. So it took forever, even after I was an adult, for me to speak up, make my own choices, or do things I actually wanted to do. I still struggle with it a lot. That you should never do anything for others because nobody will do anything for you. I understand because my mom came from a very rough household growing up, but it was frustrating whenever she found out I bought lunch for my friends or gave someone a ride. It would always be the, nobody will look out for you, why do the same? That anger doesn't have to be the default reaction to anything you don't like. Someone has a different opinion, they're telling you you're wrong and stupid and you should be ticked. Someone makes an offhand comment that struck you the wrong way, they're jerks, you should be angry. Anything, anytime, anywhere happened that you didn't like for any reason, be angry. No thanks. It makes for a crappy life. Edit, wow you guys, I'm glad that this is something positive for everyone, and a lot of people have asked how to do this, for themselves or others. So instead of trying to reply to everyone, I'll give the short-ish answer here. First, realize that being angry at everything is going to make life pretty horrible. Then, it's just reminding yourself every time you have that gut reaction to ask yourself if it's worth it or not. 9 times out of 10, it's not. If it's situational, try and make the best of it as best you can, depending on the situation, obviously. If it's personal, try to see the other person's perspective. If they're just being a jerk, think of something you're going to enjoy doing later, smile, and wish them a great screw-off while you go about your day, because jerks aren't worth your emotional effort of being angry. I just want to add that minor inconveniences don't equal the end of the world. My mom does this thing where if eggs or whatever at the grocery store are really high due to inflation or high demand, she makes a big deal out of it and complains the whole time we're shopping. Like, I get it, stuff is expensive, but you're already buying 20 other things. You can wait on the eggs, Mom. My dad thought it was funny to teach my sister, brother, and I the wrong names to things. Sister confuses plates and bowls, brother confuses forks and spoons, I get confused with beetroot and capsicum. I get it right. Most of the time now. My mom is obsessively clean. It took me a couple years into my marriage to stop cleaning to her standards. I'm not a dirty person, but I don't have a fit about a little dust on the baseboards. She should see my carpet right now. I've been sewing. There are scraps and threads all over. She'd twitch. Cooking chicken. Until college, I thought that chicken was supposed to be dry. I hated it. My buddy cooked me chicken parmesan, and it was the best chicken I ever had. Turkey for me. I felt like a traitor to my family when I had Thanksgiving dinner with friends, and the turkey was better than I can ever remember my mom making, and she prides herself on her cooking. She was outdone by a guy a third of her age who was probably drunk for most of the cooking. I felt even more guilty taking my kids, both teenagers, there next time. We still do family Thanksgiving, but the 3 of us feel a little guilty about having more fun with 20 to 30 people crammed into a tiny apartment, most of them drinking and playing Cards Against Humanity and eating off of paper plates, than we do at a nice quiet table following all the traditions we followed forever. This is another one that hit home for me. When I was in college, I really started coming out of my shell as a human being and realizing that you can make friends and talk to them outside of class. It's because I'd always been pretty terminally online, so I wasn't really good at making friends. So having the chance to hang out with them, make and eat food with them, and play dumb party games with them, it was like I had found a new family. I like to reference the full quote, because people know this as blood is thicker than water, but it's actually blood of the covenant is thicker than water of the womb. Not to diss on anybody who's really close with their family, but sometimes having friends is your family. 10 out of 10 would recommend having friends. That just because someone is older than me doesn't mean that they know more than me. Yes, it's true that I don't have as much experience or knowledge about things in the world, but it is possible for me to know something that someone who is older than me doesn't know. My dad always used the I'm older / wiser / more experienced line if I said something, a fact or piece of information that he didn't agree with or think was true. It made me feel a little insecure about what I know and if what I know is right or not. My mom taught me that I had to respect my elders, even if they were possibly wrong because they were older and wiser. My dad, on the other hand, sat me down one day and said, "Son, people are stupid. Just because they are older doesn't mean they know crap from apple butter. I don't care how old they are. If they don't know their butt from a hole in the ground, it's okay to call them dumb. You're going to run into people who are smarter than you, but you're also going to run into people who will make you wonder just how in the world they managed to not drown themselves while taking a pee in the morning. You can know a lot, or you can know a little. A smart man knows that he doesn't know everything. He also knows the value of common sense." That I'm not done eating until the plate is clear. I think my parents had a really good system for this. When each of us kids reached an appropriate age, we were to serve ourselves and had to clear our plates. We quickly learned how to portion meals appropriate to our individual sizes and appetites. All things political. My mother's side of the family is a constant cycle of choosing the opposite side of the political spectrum to spite one's parents, not for any actual political reasons. That I'm responsible for everyone else's feelings. My parents are narcissists, and if they were ever in a bad mood, it was because of something I did. I've spent my whole life managing their emotions, learning what sets them off, learning the subtle triggers, making sure you don't ever step out of line or say something that they might misinterpret or take too personally. And not just with them. I had to do that with everyone so that I will be a, quote, good kid and not make other people angry, because being a, quote, bad kid would reflect very poorly on them, and we can't have that. I now know that other people's emotions aren't my freaking problem, but I still feel responsible for my parents. It's tough. Korean fan death. For those who don't know about this, Korean people believe that if you sleep with the fan on with all windows and door closed, you will die. Still can't convince my parents that this is a myth. So I will be super dead? I've slept with the fan on since I got hamsters 8 years ago. They are long gone and I haven't gone back. I can't sleep in total silence now. Edit. My most upvoted comment by far. And to answer why, it was because those little jerks had a squeaky wheel that they only used at night, on top of general rustling. Anyway, one of them killed the other, so the survivor was cast out into the wilderness many years ago. No, nobody believes me when I say this. It's always hamsters that die the weirdest deaths. I swear to God, you can't go 5 minutes without someone telling a hamster story, and they end it with like, oh, I boiled my hamster alive because he crawled into the pot while I was making mac and cheese. It's never a natural death. You never hear about a hamster growing old and dying naturally. It's always really, really weird. I do not have to say sorry for everything. I used to say I'm sorry for everything. Reached for the same cookie? Sorry. We had different opinions and you're frustrated? Sorry. Didn't grab the right bag of groceries out of the truck? Sorry. I said sorry for everything. Even when cashiers didn't have nickels to give me back a change, I apologized for me causing them that inconvenience. Unlearning that is still a struggle at times. It's times like this I am reminded of a wise man. Do not be sorry. Be better. Thank you, Kratos, God of War. That loud noises and roughhousing caused the cake to not rise when baking in the oven. Come to find out 20 years later, it was just a lie to get us to be quiet. Now that I think of it, they got quiet kids and cake. Scratch that, I'll remember this instead and use it in the future. That it's okay to want affection, and that it's not normal to be surrounded by fighting all the time. That I'm not a special snowflake. Being, quote, smart and talented stopped mattering around age 17, and it felt like a fraudulent cut-up until I learned how to work and apply myself. Shoutouts to all my gifted and talented kids with severe depression and anxiety, let's go! How to money. They never dealt with credit cards, student loans, etc. What they taught me was superficial, and some of their strategies put me deeper into debt. Took years, but dug out. My credit is great, and I'm actively saving every month. To always assume the worst might happen. My parents are conservative in every way, shape, and form. Like, no, Mom, just because I'm out having a good time with my friends and don't answer my phone doesn't mean that I'm dead. Now that I'm 100% independent, I'm learning that sometimes risk equals reward, whereas my parents had taught my siblings and I that risk usually leads to demise. I feel like I have to say sorry for all my commentary, but I really have a lot to say in this one. When I told my parents I wanted to go to a convention in another state with some online friends, my dad freaked and said that I would get trafficked. Like, there's a certain amount of risk that comes with flying in an airplane, being around people you never met in person, and being in a city, but you should expect your 24-year-old son to be a little more aware of what's happening than you think he is. By the way, had a fantastic time, and I'm going to another one with the same friends here in a few months. That men should be busy doing manly stuff and that taking care of / entertaining the kids is women's work. Screw that. I hang out and do stuff with my kids every chance I get. What's the point of having them if you don't want to spend time with them? That you can always do better. Not that that's intrinsically bad, but when you don't learn to stop and appreciate what you've accomplished, you'll never be satisfied. Eat crappy. We never ate vegetables. Always starches and crap. So much processed BS. I'm 28 and finally have managed to restrain my palate to eat vegetables regularly. I do my best to eat plenty of veggies every day of all different types, and I'm very concerned with my health and fitness. Passing this on to my son is super important to me. All the time she called me a spoiled brat when I cried because we were eating ramen every night and I had no clothes to wear to school and problems with my lungs because the crappy house we were in had black mold, but we could somehow magically afford $60 to $80 of liquor for her boyfriend every week. That's some crap I am still unlearning. The bit I'm unlearning is that it's okay to voice your unhappiness. You are not spoiled for wanting decent living conditions. It's okay to accept gifts/help from other people. It does not make you a bad person and does not mean you are using them. Not accepting that my daughter is truly sorry for what she's done until she cries. When we were kids, if my sister or I broke the rules, we would get the wrath of dad come down on us. Anything besides ending up crying was disrespect or not taking the telling off seriously. My dad is from the Pacific Islands. Not that this in any way excuses him, but it's what he was taught. Children are disrespectful, parents are there to put a stop to it. I've caught myself early on, and I'm learning to turn myself around. Anger management, parenting courses. But I can hear my dad coming through sometimes, and it frightens me. I'm trying to stop the cycle. I can feel the irrational anger starting to come out if I'm telling our girl off and she just dismisses me. But I make it a point to be the adult in the situation, and remember that it's her age, and that she's learning. Side note, he's since changed a lot and is a fantastic and doting grandfather. I just don't want to carry on traits that I grew up with from his earlier years. When someone annoys you, cut them out of your life, permanently. Don't do this. Obviously, this is on a post where you're meant to unlearn what you've been told. In a real-life scenario, it's worth working out what annoys you most of the time. Because most people are going to know how to apologize and not do that annoying thing again. You just got to be simple and upfront without bashing them. But if you're online and somebody is bothering you, the block button is right there, especially if they're talking to you about some BS that you don't care about and they've just messaged you on Twitter for the first time. Okay, when I was a toddler, my dad used to play this game with this rhyme, where he'd recite 4-acre, eye blinker, nose stopper, chin bopper. Poked my forehead, the spot between my eyes, the tip of my nose, and then my chin. And then a year or so later, my mom and I were in the car and I said something like, "Mom, my 4-acre hurts." And she looked at me and I was like, "Honey, that's your forehead." I looked back at her like she was insane and argued with her. "No, it's my 4-acre." And she had to answer me back, "No, sweetie, it's your forehead, really." And I argued the point with her for half a minute before I realized that all this time I had been convinced that my forehead was actually called my 4-acre. Let's end this on a long one. They instilled in me that all I had to do was go to college and get through it, and then I'd get, quote, my job that would pay $60,000 with benefits, and then I worked there until I retired, didn't matter what I studied or if I networked or pursued extracurriculars. Just finish school and you get your job. When that didn't work, put in more applications. I graduated in 2008 when there was no economy, with a useless degree and no extracurriculars or internships, and a GPA that was too crappy to even consider grad school. I've spent the last 8 years figuring out that this is now a hustler's economy, and you don't make money by applying to places and sending out your resume unless you're looking for a $9 an hour job at a sandwich shop. You have to develop actual skills, be good at BSing, talk to people, keep your eyes and options open, be willing to expand your skill set, keep an eye on what skills are marketable, not be afraid to jump into something just because you've never done it before, realize that employer loyalty is a two-way street that is permanently closed and has been for years, etc. Every good job I've ever had has come from a lead that a friend has given me. None of them have come from shotgunning my resume to every pyramid scheme in the Craigslist classifieds. Basically, I had to learn this entire skill set and mindset that was completely alien to me, and unlearn the notion that you just step off the graduation stage with your bachelor's in English and start courting job offers from all the places that are eager to hire a guy whose main selling point is that he's literate, like extra literate.
Redditors who work in the ER, what's the scariest, dumbest, or weirdest thing someone has come in for? Had a lady come in for shortness of breath, began to place an oxygen mask on her, and she yells, "I'm allergic to oxygen," and pulls the mask off. I heard the doctor laugh behind the curtain. Maybe that's why she had shortness of breath? Morbidly obese guy came in for lower right quadrant pain. I lifted up his gut and found his lost wallet. Solved 2 problems at once. 20-year-old male came in for stomach pains, said he was hungry and hadn't eaten in 2 days. Maybe you should try a sandwich. I have a male cousin who landed himself in the ER because he thought that instead of a condom, he could put something tightly around his male appendage and it would force everything to stay inside. Unfortunately, getting it off posed a problem and he ultimately wound up in the ER with a zip tie around his male appendage. His nickname has been Zippy for 5 years now. So, did it work? My friend worked in ER. She had an obese man come in complaining of a rash under his gut. Upon close examination, they found several splinters. When asked, the man casually replied, "Oh, that must have been from the love board." So the crew had to ask for details. Apparently, the couple had to use a board to pry the man's gut up to get to his business for lovemaking activities. Well, there's an image in my mind I'll never lose. A girl came in saying she was miscarrying, claimed 27 pregnancies and 0 live births, says that in the last 2 years since she went on birth control to help regulate her periods, she's had a miscarriage every month. We had to explain to her that she was experiencing regular periods. You know, this is why you need to pay attention in health class. My aunt is a nurse and this is her story. 2 extremely drunk men come in. One of them fell down the stairs and somehow got glass in his eye. They had pulled out the glass and sealed the gash in his eye with super glue. They had to soak the eye in acetone to get it open. That's terrifying. I'm an x-ray tech and the hospital I used to work at had a lot of homeless people come in. This one man came in and there was an order to x-ray both his feet. As soon as I got to the hallway with his room, there was a nasty smell. I got to his room, opened the door, and almost puked. He was soaking his feet in water and it was the worst thing I have ever smelled in my life. His skin was peeling off and getting stuck to the x-ray board. I had to stop a couple times, but I kept my poker face. One case that really freaked me out was a guy that came in that was around my age, mid-20s. He was having severe pain in his shoulder, but claimed he didn't injure it. He gets taken back and gets x-rays done and finds out his body is absolutely riddled with cancer. He was given 1 year to live. The family's reaction to the news was so heartbreaking to witness and something I'll never forget. A number of things come to mind, but top 3 without thinking. 1. Man with a 10-inch cucumber in his rectum. Didn't mention said cucumber until the MD noticed a bump on his stomach. Still didn't say anything until we got a CT result. Number 2. Older man came in with a vibrator in his rectum. Wife couldn't get it out and refused to come with him. Number 3. Younger male came in with priapism. Urologist was called in to drain it. One of the most bloody, horrifying things I've ever seen. I saw him again 3 days later for the same thing. I honestly don't know what a priapism is, and I'm not Googling it. My mom used to work in an ER. When patients came in, she was the one who took their insurance, asked about their symptoms, took their vitals, and things like that. One day, she's entering paperwork for a woman whom I think came in for injuries to her hands, but I don't quite remember. Mom's taking her information, and one of the questions is the patient's occupation. The woman says, "Oh, I'm a stripper. I work for Dinty Moore." Mom responds that she had no idea Dinty Moore hired strippers. The woman says, "No, I'm a stripper," and gestures emphatically in the air with her bleeding hands. Turns out she strips the meat off of cowtails. That's apparently what the meat is in Dinty Moore beef stew, cowtail. I was shadowing in the ER once and this big white lady came in with this massive bruise around her lower stomach area. The doc asked what happened and she responded, "My horse kicked me in my pooter." And I just bit my lip and turned around to force myself to not immediately bust out laughing. Had a car crash through our ambulance bay, action movie style. The entire car was well within the building when it finally stopped. It was a 16-year-old kid carrying his 14-year-old brother who had been shot in the abdomen over some gang stuff. Many people had just vacated that area seconds earlier because there was a CPR that came in, and they were all in the trauma room working on that. If they hadn't been, then there would have been a lot of injuries. I used to work in the accident and emergency department in our city hospital. Without a doubt, the worst thing I ever dealt with was the police and social services bringing in a 2-year-old who had been immediately removed from his home after a child protection visit. The parents had stubbed out lit cigarettes on the child's eyes, on his actual eyeballs. He had the most horrific injuries, both old and new. I'll never forget prepping the child for surgery to have his eyes removed. The fact that any human could do this to another, especially a child and their own flesh and blood, is the scariest thing ever for me. Those people should be buried under the prison. Honestly, that's just awful. So we're going to take a hard 180 here and go back to something funny. Guy came in with a salt shaker lodged in his butt, said he was changing a light bulb, then somehow fell onto it. How do they always fall onto it? My sister had a patient who was interested in having her clitoris pierced but was afraid of the pain. Curious, she affixed a super strong magnet on top of and below the clitoris but couldn't remove them. By the time she got to the hospital, her tissue was essentially dead. The doctor had to scrape the magnets off as there was no other way to remove them. I'm a man and was born with all requisite parts, so you know just how serious this is when I say that story made my clitoris hurt. One time the news was playing on the TVs in the waiting rooms. The anchor mentioned a man shot in a gang-related fight who later died from his injuries. Suddenly, my parents hear screaming and crying in the other room. It was the family of the guy who got shot. They had not been informed yet. Oh, that's terrible. How is the news finding out before the parents who are in the waiting room? Come on, guys. I had a guy who put a flare gun between his legs, I guess pretending it was his thing, and fired it. 3rd-degree burns to the groin are not fun. Probably the dumbest one I've had was a husband and wife who rode in an ambulance together, both clearly drug-seeking. For whatever reason, they were placed in rooms across the hall from each other and kept yelling back and forth about what drugs they were getting. The ambulance was initially called for the wife who had fallen downstairs. No injuries visible or on x-rays. The husband rode in with them and checked in, claiming the wife had fallen into him and taken them both to the ground. The husband's only injury was where he said his feet had tangled in the steps. There was no bruising, swelling, abrasions, nothing. But he had clearly just manually pulled out 5 of his toenails. They were not contiguous toes and it involved both feet, just the nails. Emergency medicine is the daily interface in the process of natural selection. So it takes something truly stupid or crazy to shock me these days. Here's a couple highlights from me. Had a guy come in with a plastic hanger, the hook part, stuck in his cornhole. As it went in, it snapped and broke away from the body of the hanger. Next, the 50-year-old dude who came in with generalized abdominal pain said he had no idea what was going on. Super nice guy, talkative, very friendly. We do an abdomen acute x-ray and all you see is a massive set of batteries floating in his colon. Yep, giant dildo lodged way too far in. Off to the OR he went. Lastly, the nice couple who came in after a vigorous boning session because she broke his thing. One interventional radiology study later, where they inject dye into his urethra to test for patency, and the dye wouldn't advance, showing a stricture in the urethra. Off to the OR he went. One of the stranger complaints I've heard as a resident. I had a 19-year-old guy come into the emergency department on the night shift on 4/20 this year. His complaint was that he got high and he decided he should touch himself and his urethra felt harder than normal. Not his thing, his urethra. I got to the room to assess him and he was in the bathroom peeing. His poor girlfriend was sitting in the corner with her head in her hands out of embarrassment. He got back from the bathroom, stood in the doorway and said, "You know, I feel better now. I think I'm just gonna go home." And then he turned around and walked out. So wait, he just had to pee? I used to be an EMT, and one time we got called to a house in the middle of the night for a patient with belly pain. We get to his house and he's bent over a chair in extreme pain. We get him in the ambulance and start taking him to the ER. The whole drive, he's letting out tiny farts that are deadly, also yelling that he just needs to fart. Can't we give him something to make him fart? The ER doc asks us if there's a possibility of a foreign body issue, and I say that I didn't check. The doctor sends him to the CT CT scanner where he lets rip a fart that echoed. He felt better and left the ER. They had to close the scanner to air it out. You know what? I appreciate that. I wouldn't want to be the next patient walking into that place. I have two friends that are nurses in ER. Friend A said that there was a guy who went in because he had a pickle stuck in his butt. Friend B said that there was a guy who went in because he had a pickle jar up his butt. Will everyone stop putting things up their butt? I had a guy walk in completely impaled with a 4x4 wood post. He was drinking and working on his roof when he fell off. His buddy got a chainsaw, cut the bottom off the post, and somehow the impaled guy stood in the back of the pickup truck for the ride to the ER. He walked in the reception area and said, "Hey everybody, I hope you don't mind if I cut in line a bit. This seems quite serious," and promptly passed out. He survived. I worked in an ER for a little over 2 years and as an EMT running 911 calls for another 2. I have plenty of stories, but this one's pretty good. So these two 20-ish-year-old girls come in and they're lovers. Apparently they had been fooling around and one girl stuck a bottle of hand sanitizer in the other's butt. The bottle was about the same size as a shampoo bottle. Well, it got stuck, so they came in to have it removed. The doctor was able to pry it out of her butt and he threw the bottle in the trash. The girls were discharged and the girl's nurse, who we'll call Steven, and myself walk in to clean the room for the next patient. Steven says to me, "Hey, check this," reaches into the trash and pulls out the offending bottle of hand sanitizer with his bare hands. He squeezes a huge dollop of the gel in his palms and rubs his hands together, laughing hysterically. That was one of the weirdest. Also, once in medical school, I was doing a clinical at a very small 3-bedroom ER in a very rural town, and this giant fat lady accidentally burned her left breast off trying to pour a giant pot of boiling pine sol on the floor. First, the whole hand sanitizer thing, I get that you're cleaning it with the hand sanitizer after, but it's just gross. Second, burnt off? A colleague told me this one. Man came in with a major rager that wouldn't go away. Claims he hadn't taken any drugs, but I have no idea if that's true or not. Turns out he woke up with it, then went to work for a full day before coming to emergency to get checked out. I honestly don't know what happened after that. I don't work in ER, but in a hospital. Back in West Virginia, girls used to come in frequently for just a pregnancy test. Not like they sell them in the dollar store or anything. My absolute favorite was a 23-year-old who came in at like 3 a.m. because their sunburn was itchy. There was also a guy who had a baseball-sized festering stinky sore on the top of his head. He had had it for over a year and was just wearing a baseball cap and ignoring it. You could smell him from the hallway. A dude shot some kind of injectable Mexican Viagra into his thing so he could have some fun with his girlfriend. Turns out he basically totaled his junk. Urology told us that it was never gonna work again. Best part was, he had a wife who he had to explain this to. Finding out that some old dude with a part of his intestine hanging out of his abdomen that drips out poop all the time, and who's unable to get a hard-on without shoving a needle into his business, is somehow married and has a girlfriend while I'm still single as hell, was quite a realization. Well, if it makes you feel any better, he's probably not going to have either for long. So my brother works in the ER. A guy came in the middle of the night with a carrot stuck in his butt. He said he was walking in his garden and fell. Another was a couple who came separately to the ER at night. The girl had a heavily bruised head or something like that, and the guy had a crooked thing. Apparently, while the girl was giving the guy a little bit of fun, she had a seizure, her jaw clenched, and the guy panicked and hit her with something. The situation with the couple sounds awful in so many ways. My brother had two varsity football players, rivals from rich AAAs no less, come in with fractured arms, shoulders, and concussions. They actually had to choose between getting them out of their pads and physically restraining them when their screaming alerted one another that they were both in the same ER. Both of them had functioning legs and both were in cleats. There were stitches for staff afterwards. Don't you guys have other stuff to worry about in this moment besides your school rivalry? Come on. My aunt said it was incredibly common for people to come in complaining about terrible stomach pains only to be told that they had a, well, buttload of poop that they just needed to get out. I worked in ER billing, not the ER, but this story actually makes me incredibly angry. I had a less than 10-year-old kid's chart with codes for nausea, vomiting, and a broken rib. So I, being Snoopy and having time to waste, opened up the nurse's notes instead of just entering the info. Turns out the kid swallowed his toothpaste after brushing instead of spitting it out. Mom of the Year freaked out and gave the kid the Heimlich, to the point of breaking her own son's rib. An honorable mention goes to the lady who came in with her workers' comp insurance info ready to go for a laceration, which is pretty common. But in the section for laceration repair, the nurse had angrily scribbled through dermabond and sutures and whatnot to handwrite tiny band-aid in the box. Yeah, this lady went to the ER and wasted a whole bunch of people's time for a paper cut. My godmother was a surgical tech, and the best weird stories all involve things stuck up people's butts. Bottles of Windex, shaving cream cans, tubes for gerbils. Did you know putting live gerbils in your butt was a thing? I didn't know that. The worst part was half of the patients she saw for the "I shouldn't have put that in my butt" were repeat offenders. Then there was the older patient who called her in because he couldn't find his appendage. Turns out he had a ton of foreskin and couldn't pee. Mom had to glove up and use a tongue depressor to uncover the head of his business so he could pee. The ER is full of crazy stuff like this. While I was sitting in a waiting room, a man comes in, maybe 50 to 60 years old, goes up to the counter and tells the lady, "Yeah, I don't know if this is cause for concern or not, but I went to bed on Tuesday night and woke up today." It was Saturday morning, 3 days later. He was told to have a seat and I was out of there soon after, but I've always wondered what the story was behind that one. My curiosity's been piqued here too. Yeah, I'd be going to the hospital too. Please give me an answer to what just happened. A guy came to the ER with an arrow through his head. We thought he was wearing one of those Halloween props, but no, it was real. Watching the neurosurgeons trying to maintain composure when examining the patient was priceless. He went straight to surgery and, from what I understand, did very well. Yeah, I'm sure the surgeons don't have to deal with something quite like this very often. At the time, I was working as a transporter in the radiology department. We shuttle patients in the building to and from tests. I get a page to pick up a patient from our green zone in the ER, non-emergent. I walk into the nursing unit and start looking for the nurse. They see me and get that weird smile on their face. The type of smile in healthcare that makes you worry about what type of patient you're going to be picking up. I walk into the patient's room, introduce myself, and then explain we're off to x-ray. The patient is a very unassuming 20-something-year-old male, non-belligerent, and answers my identification questions very calmly. If anything, he just looks slightly red-faced. I ask him if he's able to walk, and he explains that he's having stomach issues and really would prefer not to. No big deal. I have him get his legs on the stretcher they use as beds in the room and wheel him on over to x-ray. Get him in the room, close the door, and go to fetch the techs to take the images. Now, our x-ray staff is full of seasoned techs with 10+ years of experience on average each. The tech looks at the order and tells me to wait around since it won't be long. Alright, no problem. The tech comes back from the exam room, super quiet about 6 minutes later with a slight smirk. She waves the other techs over to a computer in the back room, away from the patient, chuckles, and pulls the images she just took to be fixed up. Two of the younger female techs bolt away from the computer, hands to mouth, and slam the door. One of the techs whistles, and the older female techs, almost in unison, go, "Well, that could cause an abdomen complaint." Very visible in the rectal cavity was a large toy. Long story short, the patient told the tech that he had a new girlfriend and she wanted to try something new. Little do most people realize that it gets to be like a vacuum to get things out of there, and up it went. 5 hours later, he was released after it was removed, the old-fashioned way. Ladies and gentlemen, this entire video has been a PSA. Don't stick stuff up your butt.
Boys, be completely honest. What makes a girl go from a 10 out of 10 to a 1 out of 10 instantly? Was on a first date once with what seemed like a sweet girl, and she then bragged to me how she and her best friends would go to clubs and hit on ugly guys to lead them on, then laugh at them for thinking they had a chance. She was actually proud of this. Constantly complaining about everything and everything. There has to be something you enjoy. That or never taking responsibility for your own faults and always having to blame someone else for it. My last boyfriend did this, my last boyfriend did that. Well, damn, girl, why don't you go back to your last boyfriend then?
Fellow men, please, you gotta stop doing such nice things for your girls. It makes the rest of us look bad when we can't exactly keep up with the standard.
I'm joking, of course. It absolutely sucks to be constantly compared to someone else that you are not. Mine is the same as another earlier comment. Had been seeing a smoking hot woman. Looked like a Robert Palmer girl. Then she kicked my cat. What was funny was Bip the cat then stalked and attacked her by leaping from a chair and latching onto her arm. You didn't mess with Bip the cat. He was my bro. 1. Physical violence. 2. Infidelity. 3. Illegal substance abuse. 4. Scientology. 5. Needless cruelty. Treating restaurant staff badly, dishonesty, manipulative behavior. I was seeing someone much more attractive than anyone I've ever dated before. She was pretty chill and interesting, and on our third date, we went to my favorite restaurant and she was rude to the staff. I was so embarrassed that not only did I break up with her, I went back to the restaurant afterwards to apologize. Service work sucks enough without someone being awful. I'm a little mad and embarrassed now, a year later, thinking about that awful date. You know what? I'd probably break up with them too. If that's your favorite restaurant and you know the staff, that would be super embarrassing. I'd be mortified. If they feel the need to do a TikTok dance in the middle of busy public areas. 1. Playing on the phone while having an in-person conversation. 2. Littering. 3. Being a crappy parent.
No hobbies. I don't want someone who wants me to entertain them. I want someone who has their own life and their own friends and doesn't feel abandoned if I want to spend time on my own or going out with my own friends.
Yeah, I gotta hard agree on that one. If someone doesn't have any friends or hobbies or anything like that to preoccupy their own time and they're constantly just like, no, I need you for company and entertainment and everything because I have no one, it can be really unhealthy for a relationship. Had a girl once who basically assumed that not constantly texting was akin to no interest at all. Any time after the conversation would naturally go stale, or after a pause in replies, I would get a, "What are you up to?" or "What's up?" And of course, I'd just be honest and say, "Browsing Reddit, haha." Like, there's only so many ways you can make one's downtime be interesting for a conversation's sake. Ironically enough, that was one of the many factors that did contribute to me losing interest in her. It is exhausting being someone's sole source of happiness and entertainment. I was in love with a girl when I was a teen. I was smitten. She was a 10 out of 10. She had a cat. One day, it made her mad, and she grabbed the cat and hurled it against the wall. I instantly despised her from there on. Since she lived close, I also stole said cat a few weeks later. She didn't deserve Muffin. I renamed him afterward. I don't think she ever noticed. I didn't talk to her anymore. Had a date a few weeks ago. We agreed to meet at a local restaurant that has 2 locations. She wanted to go to the closer one by the highway. To be fair, I was about 3 or 4 minutes late, but I walked in and she wasn't there. She actually went to the wrong one, but she got mad at me for it. I attempted to salvage the date and we agreed to order takeout and meet at her place. The address she gave me was wrong. She lived at Street Place, and the address she told me was Street Drive, which are about 15 minutes away from each other. She's messaging me about how impatient she's getting the whole time I'm trying to decipher where I'm supposed to go. I don't text and drive, and she got upset that I wasn't responding to her. So 1. Gets upset with you for their mistake. 2. Gets upset with you for their mistake. 3. Gets mad at you that you aren't endangering yourself and others by texting and driving. One time I dated this girl I met from Tinder. We went on adventures like hiking and rollerblading, and it was getting a little more serious. We slept together after the 3rd date, and I wanted to see her again the next day after we both worked because I fall easily and become like monogamous after our sex. So we go to work, and afterward we decide to go to the bar with some of my friends. I wanted to introduce her to them and kind of flex, show her off a bit. We get there, and I swear to God, when she met my friend Jesse, she completely ignored me for the rest of the night and left with him. They ended up getting together and split after a few months, and she had the gall to text me to hang out again after. I think I'm still emotionally scarred from that. She was perfect with just the 2 of us, and then she had zero loyalty to me in a social setting. To be fair, I never communicated that I wanted us to be exclusive, but I still felt betrayed by both of them. That is now my biggest flag I look for. Yeah, buddy, Jesse is clearly not a friend. And to be absolutely honest, if I met a woman who then went on to try and flirt and have sex with my friends afterwards, I would be like, nope, you're a problem. Get the hell out of here. Girls who think using an Android phone is a deal breaker. Saying really mean stuff about people they just hung out with.
Inability to be accountable or apologize, being rude to service industry folk, no self-awareness, generally being a spoiled or narcissistic person. Overly obsessed with the devil's lettuce. I don't care if people want to have a smoke to wind down at the end of a workday, but if it's your only hobby and topic of conversation, it gets boring real fast.
She continually tells me throughout the day that I'm small enough that she could probably bench press me. It happened. She wouldn't stop repeating it. It got real annoying real fast. I was picturing the pig from Duckman saying that. I can't remember his... Corn-fed. Anyway, just a personal thing. Is anyone else, really tired of the simping for, muscular women or, muscular characters in fiction and stuff? With the whole, oh, break me like you're baited. I am the Batman, mummy, please. It's just so incredibly cringe.
Being dumb as a brick.
If she doesn't know what she's talking about and likes to argue a lot.
The princess attitude in general, but most specifically when it comes to finances. Don't get me wrong, I want to buy/do nice things for my girlfriend, but I hate doing things like that because they are expected of me. I want to do them because I want to do them and make people I care about happy. The second I get, you can't afford me vibes, I am out. We probably don't have much in common anyway, and I want a partner, not an extra expense. Life is hard enough without a constant attitude and headache when they don't get everything they want.
Acting malicious towards the elders, animals, or children.
Victim mentality. Someone who doesn't take responsibility for her own mistakes. 0 out of 10 when the individual must have a phone in hand in order to showcase everything we're doing whilst doing it. Under the guise of sharing. Put down your phone when you're with another human being. Everything that was on the web will still be there when you return to it. And all the new stuff? Well, that'll be there too.
I too hate that. Am I guilty of it sometimes because, a lot of my work is online and whatnot? Yes, but it's becoming more of a generational issue. When she tries to make me believe that all of her exes were abusive, deadbeats, cheaters, and man-children, and she had absolutely no role in her past relationships falling apart. I mean, in all fairness, just about anyone can do that. Bad hygiene, i.e. bad breath, bad body odor, dirty fingernails. When they just trauma dump on you relatively quickly after meeting, I get it, and I want to be emotionally available, but sometimes it's just too much too soon.
When she turns out to be actually just 3 kids in a trench coat.
I know that's just an old joke in general with a bunch of kids pretending to be an adult man or woman or whatever, but I can't help but think, are they specifically referencing BoJack Horseman? Unapologetic alcoholism. I can't hang with a woman who regularly passes out drunk at 9 p.m. and then goes to work at 6 a.m., even if she's totally functional. If they use my gender as a weapon against me,
why don't you act like a man? Or, man up and do it. Or, a real man would be able to.
I have fortunately not experienced this directed at me by a date or girlfriend, but I have heard women say this about other guys. Screw that. Screw you for saying that. I'm part of a group that conducts research on psychology of men and masculinity. I know exactly how far this goes to keeping men trapped in the worst versions of masculinity and masculine behavior. These statements that are aimed at hurting men are just the worst kind of manipulative, awful behaviors, and most people don't even realize how bad it is. But it's like I've seen too much. I know how much it affects things at a societal level, not to mention how personally insulting it is. A vegan who looks down on and actively attacks non-vegans. Just for context, I'm vegetarian. It was hard enough for me to become vegetarian after 20 years of shoving chicken tenders and sushi down my gullet. Went on a date with a 10 out of 10 girl to a casual dining restaurant, and I dared to have cheese in my food. She scolded me, publicly raised her voice and everything. People looked at us to see what the fuss was about. The rest of the conversation, her body language consisted of judgment and eye rolls. Mind you, this was the first date. She still asked me if I wanted to go back to her place that night. It was a big nope. Oh my God, you cannot control what someone else wants to put in their body as much as you'd like to. You just can't. Unless, of course, I guess that person is killing themselves, literally, with the amount of crap that they're shoveling down their gullet, in which case, if it's not that, you're probably just a butt of a human being, or a control freak. Materialism, luxury brands, inability to have a philosophical or abstract conversation. Being a litterbug.
When she says anything along the lines of, my presence is a present,
Cigarettes. Emotional immaturity, inability to properly communicate her problems or feelings, inability to take accountability and remediate bad behavior or actions, narcissism, and all those fun dark triad traits, inability to take constructive criticism, the list goes on.
1. Star signs. Just don't. 2. Posting multiple selfies a day on social media. I hate myself too much to be with someone that narcissistic. 3. Live, love, laugh, merchandise. Basic. 4. Loves drinking. Personal reason. I'm a recovering alcoholic who's currently sober. 5. Likes having sex with people who aren't me. I'm just a monogamous person. Sue me. 6. Treat their family like crap. Different if it's with abusive family members. 7. Overspending on luxury items. I'm a simple man and a thrifty woman like my GF are a turn on. She finds bargains like bloodhounds find bodies. 8. Highly extroverted. I'm highly introverted. I can't be around people of any gender with that much social energy. 9. Overly touchy. Even in a platonic way, just a personal space thing. 10. Persecution complex. Just shows a lack of accountability when their crappy lives are everyone else's fault. It's 2023. Sort your crap out. Nobody's stopping you. 11. Born and raised in a religious cult. Another personal one for me. Long story. 12. Ridiculously long acrylic nails. Other than getting in the way of wearing gloves for a dirty job or the sound they make when they hit solid objects, I really have no other reason. I really like my back scratchies, but not when they draw blood. 13. Upspeak. Goes both genders. Basically, just a sign that your personality is undeveloped. Sorry if a lot of that makes me sound like a douche, but they asked for honesty and I honestly sat down for like 20 minutes to think about all of this.
Honestly, astrology is up there. Not like a mild interest or anything, but if you make real decisions based off it and really believe, honestly, the same kind of goes for any spiritual or religious stuff, but the people I know only do astrology. Probably the exact same things that take a guy from a 10 to a 1. Just being a crappy person pretty much destroys physical attractiveness regardless of gender. Yeah, I do agree with this person. It's just that people decided, it's gonna be a boys topic. Yeah, get the boys in here.
Whipping out a bigger Johnson than mine. Silent treatment and emotional manipulation.
Grow up and talk about your feelings. But talk, not scream or yell when it's advantageous, but silent treatment when it's not. Take 5, have a breath, and come back and talk.
Racism, size queen, and serious substance abuse.
Ignorance.
Smoking.
On the surface, smoking and those fake nails. I cannot express how much I hate fake nails. Inside, aggressive tendencies, infidelity, lying, arrogance, and ignorance.
So everyone here is saying smoking, but I do wonder if they consider vaping to be the same thing, because I know so many people who are like, smoking and vaping, it's not the same thing. It's nothing alike, and it's like, yeah, no, it's the same thing. Personally, I don't really give a crap. Narcissism. Oh, mate, I'm sorry to say, but narcissism is like a freaking epidemic nowadays. Treating others like crap, lacks any form of empathy or any human decency whatsoever, manipulator, is a cheater, hates animals, dogs, cats, etc., displays narcissistic tendencies, being too self-centered / egotistical to the point you constantly put others down to feel better, continues to smoke / vape, just a preference since I don't like to surround myself with people who could give me lung cancer, is a far right-winger, yeah, no thanks. Went on a date with a girl about 8 or 9 years ago, not necessarily a 10 out of 10, but I was interested. Until she asked how much money I made. At the time, it wasn't much, maybe $40K, but she made it very clear that her 5-year plan was to marry a guy that makes good money, have a kid or 2, and be a stay-at-home mom. She was a pediatric nurse making $100K by herself. She was willing to give that up just so she could stay at home as a housewife / mom. Last I checked, she's still single. When they're gorgeous, but arrogant about it. Dated a girl that always talked down on other women or criticized their appearance. Even if we were just watching a TV show, I had to hear her dissect exactly which aspects of which female character's face she didn't like. Ugh. Nothing. If she's really a 10 out of 10 and is willing to settle for little old me, then as far as I'm concerned, I'll overlook the whole serial killer thing. I mean, she's a 10, right? Who am I to judge? No amount of pretty is worth 1 ounce of drama. Women who throw food or drink containers out of the car.
You know, I totally get it. It's relevant to what your principles are, what you respect, what you don't respect, your likes and dislikes, whatever. But a lot of these, have really not even been relevant to gender or anything. I was really expecting, like, right off the bat, if she treats me like crap and then blames her period or something like that. That is something that is only relevant to women. She didn't like dogs, particularly my Labrador, objecting to him being inside the house and sleeping at the foot of my bed on the floor. Said it was either him or her sleeping outside. I gave her a blanket to keep warm. Constantly talking about other people's business or regularly saying bad things about people when they are not around. I understand a little gossip here and there, but it is repulsive to me when someone constantly talks about someone else's life in a harsh or judgmental way. Main character syndrome, turning every interaction into something about themselves. Announcing that they strive to become an influencer. Talking about other guys' peckers and past SX lives. Biggest turnoff for me. I keep my past in the past and I don't talk about my experiences with other women to them. Keep it classy. Septum piercings. I completely get that one. Septum piercings are such a hit or miss look depending on the person. Realistically, nothing. Every single person who has weighed in on this has lied to you. Once you breach a certain level of hot, basically, anything goes. You'll ignore as many red flags as you need. You'll start making excuses for behaviors you despise and make excuses for why you've done so. Desire drives people to every compromise you can think of, and we're all capable of doing horrible things to ourselves for someone we think deserves it. You know, personally, I actually do agree with this one. I have seen people fall over themselves for a pretty face and just go against the things that, as far as I knew about them, they believed quite strongly in. But then pretty lady walks in. Whenever a really pretty lady talks to me and is very clear that she knows how pretty she is and she thinks she can basically get me to say or do whatever she wants, it immediately turns me off, to be honest, because I don't know, I hate giving things to people who expect it. And yes, that does in fact include gratification. Bad manners. Being a Disney adult. Assuming I can read their mind. If you can't handle me at my worst, then you sure as hell don't deserve me at my best. Ooh, I hate that too. I hate that so goddamn much. Everything about that saying I despise.
Telling stories about how she completely ruined someone's day in a personal and targeted way for minorly inconveniencing her in the course of doing their goddamn job. No, I am not impressed at how petty you are prepared to be to someone who made a minor mistake. If she's that hot, nothing could do it instantly, short of witnessing her murder someone. Instead, it will be a gradual process as the brain starts doing the thinking again.
Any variation of the "you should already know" / "I shouldn't have to tell you why." I'm not a psychic. I'm not here to play a goddamn guessing game. If you're incapable of having a rational, grown-up conversation about your feelings, I'm out. Played that game too many times and I'm sick of it.
One word replies.
When I was on dating apps, I saw that a bunch where it'd be like, I love engaging good conversation. And it's like you attempt to have a conversation with them about something, but they don't do anything to actually move the conversation along or expand upon it. They just use one-word replies. Yeah, I agree with that. It's infuriating. Constantly throwing pity parties. Not a dude, but I am bi/pan. So number 1, hard illegal substances. Number 2, cheating. Number 3, putting the toilet paper roll on backwards. Don't tell me there isn't a right way, because there absolutely is. Number 4, saying things like, I'm not like other girls, or girls just don't like me for some reason. I get along better with guys.
Crystals and horoscopes.
I think I've actually seen too many people poo-poo on astrology or tarot. I don't put much stock in it. I know how to read a tarot and stuff like that. It's just a fun thing to do. I think people probably think that the people who actually like that stuff take it more seriously than they actually do. And if they do take it that seriously, then yeah, I kind of get being a bit annoyed by it.
Breathing with their mouth open.
Ghetto talk / slang. I was dating this girl for a while until one date while we were driving back from the restaurant, she opened a chocolate bar and threw the paper through the window.
Getting hit with a frying pan.
That one does indeed suck.
Herpes.
When they act like they're doing you a favor by letting you have sex with them.
When she pees on your floor and vomits in your bed.
Being with a chick that was a 10 when I was 19 only lasted 6 months because she always told me to open up to her and be emotional. Then when I went through some hard times and finally opened up and she started making fun of me and calling me a lady's nether regions and whatnot. Knew she was mentally unstable from then on. Once we broke up, she did the old I tried to self-delete myself because I can't live without you. Psychopath. Too much makeup and wearing revealing clothes all the time. I want a girl who is proud of their natural beauty. Fake trendy accent. I still get accused of that every once in a blue moon. No sense of humor. Burps and farts. Bare feet on car dashboard. I imagine this person did not enjoy Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Nonetheless, I agree.
What's something that's common knowledge in your workplace that will be mind-blowing to the rest of us? Disclaimer, this thread was made 11 years ago. Please use discretion if you decide to follow any advice given in these responses. There's a good chance that it's incredibly outdated by now. With that being said, let's move on to the video. For example, I'm not in law enforcement, but I learned that special units such as SWAT are just normal cops during the day, giving out speeding tickets and breaking up parties, contrary to my imagination where they sat around waiting for a bank robbery to happen. The fajitas at Chili's aren't actually sizzling. They have a sauce called, quote, sizzle sauce that you spray over the hot food so it gives the illusion that it is sizzling. When you have an IV placed, there isn't actually a needle left in your arm. The needle is taken out and a tiny, flexible plastic tube is left in. So many people think that they are walking around with a needle in their arm and are afraid to move it around. Chemistry grad student. Safety regulations happen when EPA inspectors come by, not any time else. Casino dealers are not out to take your money. We live off tips. We want you to win. Strawberries are picked by hand. It sucks. 2/3 of Staples' annual profits occur during the 2 to 4 week period of back-to-school shopping. Technical writer. Lots of people work really hard to write all those electronics manuals that you don't read. Also, manuals are considered legal documents. If a client injures themselves following a set of bad instructions, the company can be held accountable. If you're going to the dentist to get work done, fillings, crowns, etc., and you use cocaine, tell your dentist. Cocaine use, within the 24 hours or even more, plus dental work equals medical emergencies and often death. So, moral of the story, don't do coke and then get a filling. Or just don't do coke in general. I feel like telling people not to do hard drugs is pretty good advice. If you knew just how much money was dumped down the drain in emergency medical services for non-emergent calls and straight up BS, your head would explode. I work in a rural system, and I've seen people burn more money in a year than they would ever make in their entire lives on EMS that they aren't paying for. This is for routine or made-up stuff. I just remembered this from my days as a car salesman, and I have never been happier from being fired from a job than the day my sales manager said, "You're a good guy, but this isn't going to work out." To see how much that used car really is, look for a sticker. Ours were red on the windshield and look for a number. Example, 191-377-499. The first and the last two numbers are the model year. The numbers in the middle is the price that the dealership sets. Anything above that is going to be commission for the salesman. Haggle accordingly. If you make a lane change on the highway and cut close in front of my big rig, you aren't making me mad. You are scaring the crap out of me. Because if you blow a tire or if anything else causes you to sharply lose speed at that moment, I will roll over you like a 40-ton avalanche and they will have to wash you and your children out of the wreckage with a hose. I work as a barista during the school year. One thing that a lot of our customers don't seem to know is that the dark roast coffee actually has the lowest amount of caffeine on the roast spectrum. So many night shift workers will come in right before we close and ask for the darkest roast we have because they need to stay up all night. We always correct them and assure them that our lightest roast has the most caffeine. I think people assume that dark roast has more because it has a stronger coffee taste. So they think that a stronger coffee taste equals more beans used to make it equals more caffeine. Not quite. We used 80 grams of beans, no matter the roast, to make around 2.3 liters of coffee. At the shop where I worked, I'm sure this is the same for many other coffee shops as well, dark roast coffee and light roast coffee are made from the same beans. Dark roast coffee, as the name implies, is roasted the longest. The beans get that bitter and burnt taste, but more caffeine is burned off in the process. Since light roast is not processed for as long, more caffeine actually stays in the coffee beans. TLDR, if you need to stay up all night, light roast coffee has the most caffeine. Geneticist here. It is estimated that about 10% of children in genetic studies are, quote, non-paternities, meaning 10% of the kids in the studies don't have the same biological father as we are told they have. Edit, wanted to clarify some things. This could happen when children aren't informed a sperm donor was used, the children didn't know they were adopted, or some other mix-up. The 10% comes from genetic disease studies, not just paternity testing. The 10% figure is often quoted in scientific articles, but some studies have been published which suggest the 10% figure is an overestimate. While it is not possible with current technology to revive large organisms that have been cryogenically frozen, it is entirely possible to revive cells that have been cryopreserved. It gets cooler. We can store cells in a deep freeze state about -200 Celsius and bring them back years later. The cells will thaw, grow, reproduce, and continue on their respective merry ways as if nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. Edit, woke up to a bunch of replies, so I'll clarify some of the top questions. Number 1. Why don't the cells burst? We use a cryoprotectant before we freeze down the cells. This prevents the water in the cells from crystallizing when it freezes. We stick the cells in special vials and put the vials in this temperature-regulating chamber that looks something like a large revolver chamber. This slows the freezing process to an acceptable rate. Once the cells reach -80 degrees Celsius, they are taken out of the regulating chamber and transferred to -200 degrees Celsius. Number 2. What's preventing you from scaling this up to animals or humans? Let me preface this answer with the disclaimer. I am not a cryogenicist. Part of my job involves storing cell lines in cryogenic states. That being said, the biggest obstacle to overcome if we were to revive frozen people would be the brain. Cells don't have brains. Cells don't even have organs. You may argue from high school biology that they have organelles, but that's not the same thing. Cells are essentially macromolecular machines. You can leave your car sitting in the driveway unattended for a couple years, and it will still run when you come back. Might need a jump or an oil change, but the analogy holds. Number 3. What cells are we talking about here? Malignant ones. Various assortments of cancer cell lines. They tend to grow a bit faster than their non-malignant counterparts and, quote, recover from freezing faster, but both malignant and non-malignant cells will recover and grow after freezing. The throttle of go-karts is located just above the motor and can make your cart anywhere from 5 to 10 miles per hour faster. I've worked at multiple retirement homes. The senior citizen residents hook up with each other quite frequently. I work with children. In regards to potty training, kids are more likely to be able to go if their feet are on a flat surface. If you don't have a potty chair for them, give them a step stool or a box or something so their feet don't dangle. Helicopter auto-rotation is something designed for and tested during helicopter development. The Helo is able to perform various maneuvers, fly forward at X speed, turn left/right at X speed, Y bank angle, etc., without engine power. Helicopter pilots routinely practice these, and not just pray the aircraft comes to the ground softly if power is lost. The reason a lot of military units have massive budgets is because the defense funding system works on a use-it-or-lose-it system. We may not need our full budget one year, but we're a deploying unit that is deploying next year and will need it then. If we don't spend it all by September 1st, the fiscal year starts October 1st, when the new budget comes out, we will have reduced funds. So units frequently spend all the money they are allotted in order to have guaranteed funding for when they need it. If the system didn't punish units for being frugal and made it easy to acquire funds needed for training and equipment, we could reduce spending quite a bit most of the time. 90% of professional brewing is cleaning things. Beer is simple and a naturally occurring substance. We just make it easier for the yeast to do their job by monitoring temperatures, anticipating problems, and cleaning. It's honestly hard to add to this thread. It's common knowledge where I work. For instance, opening a tank of fermenting beer to, quote, see how it's going will probably make you pass out from CO2 inhalation and, worst case, kill you. We frequently get drunk college students on tours asking if they can go inside a tank of beer. No, you will die. Also, we don't spend all day drinking beer and looking at samples. Mostly, it's lifting heavy stuff, cleaning, getting dirty, moving heavy stuff, and did I mention cleaning? Content warning, animal death. From working at a kennel, a lot of places only have a few sizes for coffins should you want the kennel to bury your deceased pet for you. If your pet is too big to fit one, he/she will be made to fit in it. Working at a few vets, I have no idea how common knowledge this is, but I had no idea until I worked there. But if you see an injured animal on the side of the road that isn't yours, you can bring it into most places and they will treat the animal at no cost to you. If the animal dies, it will also be buried at no cost to you. Good Samaritan laws or something like that. If your animal has gotten into illegal drugs, just tell us. We don't care. Our business is treating your animal appropriately as fast as possible. Just freaking tell us. It will save you money in the long run since we don't need to go through so many wild diagnostic measures, and your poor balls-tripping pet can get its system cleared before anything too bad happens. If your cat is in for treatment and bites one of us and has not had or is overdue for its rabies vaccine, the animal will be contained after the bite, and if it shows symptoms, it will then be euthanized and put down. This is purely personal, but if your pet is at a certain elderly age, 12 plus, and having major issues, please just consider euthanization. The amount of money you'll spend on the insane amount of treatments to keep your pet alive for another few months is not worth it. And the amount of suffering the animal endures from all the treatments is also not worth it. So many animals come in that would really be better off going peacefully into the bright light, but owners just can't let go. It's frustrating to watch. Most private colleges, especially those with high endowments and a considerable amount of prestige, will send a list of each year's applicants to their communications/development office. They'll research the kids and their families and give them a rating based on the potential the kid has to add to the endowment, basically an assessment of family wealth/potential. This is used more to distinguish between the multitude of wealthy kids who apply to such colleges. If you're poor, most schools will see that as added diversity and will help your chances at acceptance. I worked in a cardboard factory for a while, taking huge rolls of paper and gluing/baking them into cardboard sheets, boxes, etc. That warm, delicious smell that comes from your closed takeaway pizza as you drive home, it's mostly not the pizza. It's the sugar, starch, and animal fat in the cardboard and glue. The cardboard factory smelled exactly like takeaway pizza. Former prison guard here. Most inmates do not have access to weights more than 2 to 4 times per month, and only if they've earned it with good behavior. The going rate for cigarettes on the prison black market is $100 a box. If you are willing to go a few years without any friends, and you have about $100 a month of expendable income, depending on your crime, you can go your entire sentence without being in a fight or joining a gang. Non-consensual penetration happens in prison, but it isn't nearly as common as it was 30 years ago. Inmates have an anonymous hotline they can call if they want to report, and now there are cameras almost everywhere except for cells. That's where most penetration happens, and there's not a lot prison guards can do to stop it. 95% of what you see in prison TV shows or movies is creative thinking. Your first day in prison, I do not recommend picking a fight with the biggest, toughest looking guy in prison, or fighting with the first person who's a jerk to you. It won't make you look tough. More likely, you'll just go to seg for a few weeks before getting kicked out into a new unit, where you'll have to do it all over again. Instead, find out who is in charge of your race. If you're white, it'll probably be Aryan Brotherhood or Peckerwood. Then either join up or ask how much it costs to be protected. This is called paying rent. You won't make any friends paying rent, so plan on reading a lot. If you don't have the money or the desire to be extorted, you can join the gang. I wouldn't recommend this unless you're going to be down for a long time. You'll start out on the bottom of the prison gang hierarchy. After initial training period of working out, you'll be asked to do hits on enemies of the gang. The shot callers will tell you who and when you'll be attacking, and you'll be expected to follow through. The problem with this is that you'll likely be given additional time on your sentence, so if your goal is to get out of prison, this isn't the recommended route. Plus, you'll be required to get gang tattoos, which will make it difficult to live normally after prison, and are often accompanied with hepatitis C, HIV, and tuberculosis. It depends on the state, but guards in the towers are carrying weapons with live ammunition. Prison guards tend to be rednecks with fairly good aim. If you're going to kick someone's butt, don't do it in the yard. If you are perceived by a tower guard as putting someone in a position of substantial bodily harm or risk of life, you will be killed. Perimeter towers are also armed with live ammunition. If you are going to try to escape, your best bet is tunneling out or stealing a guard uniform or impersonating a staff member, etc. Over the fence will probably get you shot, unless you have friends who have bribed the guard in the tower. If you're in for anything inappropriate, you're gonna have a bad time. TLDR, don't go to prison. It sucks. Wendy's actually cracks and cooks a fresh egg every time you order a breakfast sandwich, and the chili does not come out of a can. Yeah. I see you, Wendy. I see you commenting on that Reddit post. You're not fooling anyone, pigtails. Lie to me all you want, but we know that fresh, never frozen beef is a cover-up. What next? You gonna tell us you raise chickens in the back? You have a garden where all your vegetables come from? Does Wendy herself slaughter the cow? I've got my eye on you, pigtails. This war ain't over. And now it's time for the men of Reddit to leave the room because this might make you cross your legs. When a urinary catheter is placed, a tiny balloon is then filled inside the bladder so the catheter stays in place and doesn't, quote, slip out. If a catheter is pulled out before the balloon is deflated, it shreds the urethra and is a bloody mess. Don't ever pull out your catheter. Ever. Update, another fun fact about catheters. For men, it is best for them to be hard. It makes placing the catheter a lot easier. So if a nurse has ever said thank you while placing a catheter in your semi-erect dingling, you know why. Failing a student is absolute agony for most professors. We will often look for any loophole we can find to let you pass the class, because frankly, having to tell you that you're failing is one of the worst things we will have to do for our job all year. We think about you when we turn in our grades, and we torture ourselves about it afterward. Unless your professor is truly a jerkwad, when you fail a class, you have legitimately failed that class. P.S. Grading papers takes a really long time. Coca-Cola employee here. Fun fact, that crisp, sharp smell that Coca-Cola and Diet Coke give off, strictly phosphoric acid. When I worked at AMC, we don't clean the theaters after every movie. We just sweep the popcorn under the seats, try to pick up all the big trash, and put all the armrests down. Cinemark is much more demanding. Every kernel of popcorn must be eliminated. I worked at an optometrist's office for about 2 years and sold glasses. We sold more high-end stuff, but had basically everything. What some people don't realize is that if your prescription is really strong, you should shell out the extra money for the better lens material and maybe for that anti-reflective coating. It will make a huge difference in clarity, especially if you drive at night. If you have a really low prescription, screw it. Get the cheap lenses. You won't notice. Also, if you wear contacts, freaking give your eyes a break every now and then. If you wear them from the moment you wake up until right before you go to bed, your eyesight will get way worse way faster. You risk serious infection, and you're kind of suffocating your eyes. Even if you have the kind that you can wear for 30 days straight, you sure as heck better have at least one pair of crappy glasses you can wear if you ever tear a lens into your eye or lose/run out of contacts. Healthcare worker. If we have to phone a patient at home and someone else answers, we are not allowed to identify where we are calling from or why. So, say we need to ring John Q. Citizen and his wife answers. Then we can only say, "May I speak to John Citizen, please?" Wife will ask who it is. Our name. Wife will ask, "Where are you from?" Or, "Why do you need to speak to John?" "I can't discuss that with you. Could you please put John on the phone?" Etc., etc. It causes so many issues. We would love to just say I'm calling about his blood test, but we are legally not allowed to do so. I'm not being obstructionist or rude. Please just suck it up and pass the phone over. When you visit a single page of Amazon.com, or pretty much any large-scale website, no less than 30 computers put the page together. We're talking servers that have sub-millisecond round-trip times between nodes. When they reboot, it takes an hour to refill the cache, so all results from those machines are discarded until 99.9% of the results are instant. At Outback Steakhouse, they will prepare your food however the heck you want. They'll put your sirloin in a blender if you want. Get creative. Edit, I think Outback owes me a gift card or something for all this free advertising I just gave them. I can confirm this. I once ordered a BLT, which isn't on the menu, at Outback Steakhouse, and my waiter asked me what I wanted on it. I was dumbfounded. I'm just a cashier and don't have the power/authority/ability to do most of what you want or expect me to do. I'm gonna end this on an extremely long, extremely unnecessary inkjet cartridge rant. I work for a major ink and toner remanufacturer. Guys, really, just stop goddamn printing stupid stuff. You don't need it. You are getting raked over the coals, even by me selling remands to you at 40% off. A 5,000 milliliter bottle of our most common ink costs us $120. HP 60s are our most common cartridge. They will only hold 6 milliliters. 6! We sell them for $10. Also, those cartridges are garbage. For the love of everything you find holy, stop buying HP's junk. They are made to fail to make my job harder, and since they fail on the consumer too, they just make their lives harder. Why keep giving money to a company that is actively malicious towards you? Buying an inkjet printer that is an ink tank style system will save you countless dollars and headaches, if it is a Canon or Brother. Lexmark and Epson are made to self-destruct and are also less cost-effective than Brother or Canon. These new HP 950/951s self-destruct. The 564, 920, 940 didn't, but HP made those all to be miserable to operate when using remands. For many integrated printhead carts, or drums in the case of the toners, you pay a premium to replace the printhead each time when you don't need to. HP 21, 27, or 56 carts have a page counter on them of somewhere around 2,200 to 2,500 pages. I've had older 56s stop working for customers due to the page counter before the printhead wore out. My test machine doesn't check the page counter, so it could give me a perfect print, but the actual printer will check the counter. Also, in those 21, 27, 56 cartridges, HP changed the composition of the ink to where it pretty much destroys the printhead. These make my job miserable at times, but I have worked it out to have about an 80% success rate on them now. Lexmark, Epson, and HP, and Kodak, but I'll have self-destructing cartridges. Epson for a while had self-destructing printers. Lexmark also installs a process called LexBCE that makes your print spooler dependent on it. Good luck. Lexmark are the highest cost to operate printers by far, the least reliable / lowest quality, and the most scummy company out of the bunch. Brother are generally the least expensive and have the least issues because they keep things simple. An inexpensive to operate Brother will suit most any home consumer's needs. I am not being paid by Brother. I just like that they are the least crappy to the consumer. Honestly, the only time I recommend something other than Brother is when my customer wants to print photos. Then I recommend a Canon ink tank style system. The current generation are the PGI 225/CLI 226, and they are good little cartridges, and I have sold hundreds, and can count the chip failures on one hand with fingers to spare, and even those shocked me. Now please Canon, don't make me look like a fool. If you can find an old HP printer that took the 45 or 78 cartridges at Goodwill or wherever for cheap, it's probably worth the investment to grab it. Yes, the 60s are quote cheaper, but the 45's OEM are about 35 for 42 milliliters of ink, where the 60s are about 15 for 6 milliliters. You are getting conned hard on quote cheap ink. I'm looking at you too, Kodak. Lexmark and HP send out firmware updates without your knowledge that disable your ability to use aftermarket products that are entirely legal to use. Remands are. Counterfeits are not. I'm sure it mentions it in that EULA you didn't read. My job is far, far more complicated than just shoot some ink into it, no matter what those stupid advertisements from HP claimed. Everything gets electronically tested, cleaned thoroughly, tested again, filed under vacuum, and tested again. Quote, just shooting ink into it works about 1% of the time if the cartridge just ran out of ink. When I tell you I need your empties back to keep up my stock, I mean it. I'm not trying to screw you out of your little Office Max rewards. I need your empties back to do my freaking job. Finally, one of my good friends works at a big box office supply store. Stop grousing to these people about the cost of ink. There was almost no markup on it whatsoever at the retail level. If you're paying $40 for a stinking 12 milliliter Lexmark 16 at Staples, Staples probably spent $39 on it. Some of this, while mundane to me now, elicits a response from my customers, so hopefully it fits into the discussion. TLDR, I know way too freaking much about inkjet cartridges.
Doctors of Reddit, what's your most surprising, I can't believe I'm having this conversation with an adult story? Paramedic here. Was driving with my partner and patient was in the back. Patient was fine. Patient's skeezy boyfriend was riding in the front with me and apparently saw a golden opportunity to ask a question that had obviously been on his mind for some time.
So, when cats and dogs eat grass, that means they have cancer, right?
No. No, it does not. Made for an awkwardly silent ride the rest of the way. Where did this guy hear that? I've never heard that before. Well, it looks like she's about 30 days pregnant. Congrats! How can she be pregnant? She's only around her brother. Well, they actually don't follow the same moral code as you or I. I'm a veterinarian, by the way. Thank you for the clarification there. Not a doctor yet, but I'm an ER tech. For about 2 years now, mom comes in with her baby plus 2 more older kids. Complains that the baby hasn't pooped in a while and won't stop crying. As I'm settling them in with one of the nurses, the baby is bawling. Like opera singer lungs bawling. Suddenly, mom whips out a white plastic shopping bag and sticks an end in the kid's mouth and says, "This is the only way she stops crying." Nurse and I share a look and immediately order an emergency x-ray on the kid's stomach. Turns out she had ingested a good amount of these bags and it was blocking up in her stomach. Big deal. Potentially life-threatening. When we confront the mom about her baby feeding habits, her only words of defense are, "Well, I checked all over the bag and I couldn't find anything on it that said non-edible." This woman's a potential danger to her kids. She has 2 older kids, meaning she was probably doing this with them too before. I told a patient that the 30 plus cups of coffee he was drinking every day could possibly be the reason of his chief complaints of anxiety and insomnia. He said he wasn't willing to give this up or try decaf. That's an insane amount of caffeine intake. Like, that's not healthy for multiple reasons. When I was an internal medicine resident, I came across a very nice 50-year-old Dominican lady. She was well-mannered, but one could tell she wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. As I was prepping her chart for our first visit, I noticed that she'd been seen by every single digestive disease MD in our hospital system. Not only that, she'd had every single procedure in the book, ranging from endoscopies up both holes and culminating in an exploratory laparotomy. You're opened up to basically look inside you when we have no clue what's going on. All of this because for years she'd had one single complaint. She reported severe gnawing pain in her stomach. At this point I should mention that she was Spanish speaking only. Not only that, she had a very heavy Dominican accent, and I was the first Hispanic doctor to ever see her. My first language is Spanish, and even I had difficulty understanding her. So she comes in and after exchanging some first-time pleasantries, I politely ask her how she's doing. Sure enough, although she was smiling and said she felt well, she pointed at her belly and said it was biting again and asked for the cream to kill it. At this point, I got intrigued. Her medication list only mentioned a cream used for herpes breakouts. The previous fellow only mentioned in his notes that in every single visit, she only asked for the cream and nothing else. When I asked what she meant by the biting and what she intended to do with the cream, she very calmly tells me she intends to stick the cream up her butt in order to kill the bird living inside her. After delving more deeply into her story, it turns out she didn't have a medical condition. Ever since she was a little girl, she believed that after eating a whole quail egg, the bird had spawned inside her and gnawed away at her insides whenever she was hungry. After a short visit to psych, she was diagnosed with a somatic type delusional disorder. No amount of medication or psychotherapy will cure her, but she was still a fully functional mother of 2 who paid her taxes and had 2 part-time jobs. I reached out to every digestive disease doctor in our hospital system once more to make sure she never receives an inappropriate invasive intervention. I've been following her for 3 years now, and she's as happy as one can be, considering she has a bird living inside her. Why wasn't a translator brought in long before? Why did it take her going through every single doctor and a range of surgeries to finally find someone who spoke Spanish? While in dental school, my friend pulled out several bombed out teeth on an adult male. After the procedure was finished and post-op instructions were given, the man asked, "So when should I expect my new teeth to grow in?" He was serious. My significant other is a med student. He helped to diagnose a 40-year-old woman who finally sought out a doctor after having open, festering wounds on her entire torso for over a year. The open wounds only appeared after more than a year of painful, visible lumps on her breasts. She had never sought treatment prior to this. My significant other had to inform her that her entire body was riddled with cancer, that there was no treatment to help her, and that she would be dead very soon. Her sister, who was there the entire time, began loudly proclaiming what a shame it was that nothing could ever have been done, and that hopefully someday we would be able to detect cancer sooner. My significant other watched the doctor explain that pretty much any other woman in the country would have gotten effective treatment at the first sign of the lumps. This was during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Guys, if something's wrong, just get checked. Don't put it off for a year. You never know what you're dealing with. Better safe than sorry. As a veterinarian, I had a 10-minute conversation with an owner explaining which side was the dog's left side. It's the left side. The left. I saw a patient who was concerned that she was still lactating, despite the fact that she had stopped breastfeeding her twins 2 years ago. She said, "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and find my husband sucking on them. He says he's trying to drain the milk for me." I had to explain to her that breastfeeding her husband will lead to continued lactation. Okay, this one's just creepy. Medical assistant to a cataract surgeon here. If you sleep with your contact lenses in long enough, they will fuse to your eyes and you'll need to go to surgery to have them removed. Yes, you can go blind from this. For the love of God, don't sleep with your contact lenses in. Thank you for the PSA and horrifying imagery. Got placed during a rotation in the orthopedic floor of a big hospital in a rural area in Southern California. I was doing my rounds and saw a patient out of bed and walking around the floor following a knee replacement. She had a cane in her hand that she was carrying as a soldier would a rifle. I asked what she was doing and what she thought the cane was for. She replied she thought the cane was for pushing people out of her way since she's now handicapped. I mean, I guess that's one way to use it. I'm a pharmacist, but the comment still relates. Had a lady call in complaining that her husband's Viagra wasn't working. I then went on to explain to the patient's wife that in order for the medication to work, the patient needed some sort of stimulation. The lady just screamed aloud, "Me?" and then hung up the phone. Still my favorite Viagra story. The fact that you have multiple Viagra stories to choose from makes me want to sit down and have a conversation. My friend is a student doctor and is on placement at a small town's doctor office. She had a 70-ish-year-old woman come in with complaints of a small but painless growth that was visible at the back of her throat. Turns out, it took her 70 years to notice her uvula. Yeah, that's been there the whole time. Client brings in her dog for a tick she tried to burn off. Looking, I see it's a nipple and tell her this. She says, "But he's a boy, how can he have nipples?" I say, "Ma'am, your husband has nipples." Blank stare, then light bulb moment for her. Not a doctor, but I regularly have people come in for eye examinations because when I take my glasses off, things are blurry. Often, these aren't passing comments during the exam, but the main reason for their visit to the clinic. Patient comes into ER, 19-year-old male. I'm getting his history. "Why are you here today?" "Every morning I wake up and my stomach hurts." "How long has it been hurting?" "All my life." "Well, what's different today that made you come here?" "My girlfriend doesn't think it's normal." More questions. Exam by ER physician, followed by lab tests. The abdominal pain always goes away after he eats. Always. He wakes up hungry. He thinks it's pain. I don't know what to say to this one. Just eat food? During residency in an urban northeastern USA city, I was in a clinic. A very pleasant 50-something lady came in for a physical. Everything was going fine when she casually asks if there's any new vaccines out. She was up to date with everything, so I asked if she had any specific concerns. She was casually asking to see if she could vaccinate her gay adult son against homosexuality. Very nice, always had a smile on her face, even when I broke the news to her. My mom was the head nurse at a clinic here in Houston in the 80s. She worked for an old World War II doctor that had gone into private practice as an old school general practitioner when he returned back to the States. Well, one afternoon she told me that they had a patient come in that was running a high fever and was complaining of pain in her pelvic area. My mom also tells me that there was a stench coming from the woman's lap that could only be described as enough to gag a maggot off a meat wagon. She begins to interview the patient, who told her that her and her boyfriend had been sexually active and that she has been in pain since. She thought that the woman may have contracted an STD and asked her to undress and wait for the doctor to examine her. The doctor arrives and closes the door, only to reopen it a few seconds later, mentioning about the need for fresh air. The doctor noticed that there was a discharge and began to question the patient about her sex life. Was it protected, not protected, things like that. According to my mom, the patient told her, "No doc, we always use a rubber." The doctor looked down, then noticed there was a small rubber band extending from the woman's private area. The doctor reached in with his gloved hand and pulled it out. What came next can only be described as a magician pulling the cloth out of someone's mouth. One rubber band after another came out over the course of the next 10 minutes. Finally, once they were all removed, the doctor had the talk with the woman about sex education, and that rubber bands were not a successful contraceptive, and not what they meant by wearing a rubber. That is just horrible in so many ways. Not a doctor, but a dental hygienist. I had to explain that brushing your teeth with Comet, the cleaner, was not a good way to clean your teeth to a 40-year-old woman. I also had to tell a woman that was painting her teeth with white fingernail polish that that was a bad idea. A 32-year-old grown man asked me if the hot spells he was experiencing at night meant he was going through menopause. My mother helps the Amish get dental care. One Amish woman complained that she needed new dentures. When asked why she thought so, she replied, "Well, I've lost weight, and you know that when you lose weight, you lose it in your gums first." Doctors and dentists, if you're looking for a community to serve, the Amish can truly use your help. I could write a book about the things I've seen. Why would you think it would be the gums? That's just such a weird and random place. I was a newly minted graduate with fresh and optimistic views on my life as a doctor. Second week in came this old lady and her very dysfunctional family. They would argue and complain about everything, from the food, the nurses they didn't like, and every single medical decision we made. She was very, very sick, so her management was just as complicated. She had several children, and they all didn't like one another and would not talk to one another. Each time, we would have to explain a long update to every single one of them, because they're entitled to hear it from a doctor. One of these stories being sitting down and explaining why you don't give Gatorade as an IV drip. They didn't understand why we were giving salt water to her. The conversation with her son went something like this. "Look, she likes Gatorade. She's drinking it, so why can't you give it to her through her drip?" We explain why, and the son frowns. "But it's isotonic." We explain again. "Yes, but Gatorade has more electrolytes." We explain again. "Salt water just seems to be too cheap. Can't you give her something else closer to Gatorade that has electrolytes?" This continues for 2 hours. Wash and repeat every day during her admission. Afterwards, I told my fiance. He opened up a scene from Idiocracy on YouTube, and I just sat there with my mouth open for a while. Yes, you drink Gatorade. You don't inject it directly into the bloodstream. Two very different things. While on dermatological rotation, a Middle Eastern patient saw me with what she described as some funny itching growth on her butt crack. Some quick investigation revealed it to be a severe case of genital warts. I explained the diagnosis and that it was an STD, until she shockingly assured that she was still a virgin. Now, virginity is a big issue for young Muslim women, or perhaps their families even more, but apparently that doesn't cover other types of sex, and therefore no birth control in the form of, say, condoms was needed. EMT here. I had a grown adult trying to explain to me that someone else pooped his pants. Got called out for finger paint at a homeless shelter at 2 a.m. We get there and the guy jumps in the truck with very mild swelling to the tip of his right index finger. Here's how the conversation went. Me. "So what happened?" "Yeah, I smoked some stuff and then I fell asleep in my bunk and I woke up next to my bunk and my finger hurt and there was poop." "There was poop? Did you fall in poop?" No, like in my pants. pants. So you pooped your pants. No, it wasn't me. So let me get this straight. You smoked something, took a nap, rolled out of your bed in your sleep, hurt your finger, and someone else came along and pooped in your pants before you woke up? That's what I'm saying. It wasn't me. My friend, I think you need to take a step back and analyze the situation here. My brother is a general practitioner in rural Tennessee. Enough said, right? He says most of his patients' visits go something like this. Well, person, you're pre-diabetic, have high blood pressure, and are complaining about joint pain. Have you been exercising and cutting out sugar and carbs? Yeah, I have, doc, but it doesn't seem to help. Do you have any better meds you could prescribe? Well, let's talk about your diet. How much water do you drink a day? I don't like water, as I get extra ice in my sweet tea every day to make sure I get enough water. My brother explains that that's not enough water by a long shot. How much sweet tea are you drinking every day? Those can have a lot of sugar in them. Well, I get a large one from Hardee's or McDonald's or wherever on my way to work with my breakfast, and another one on my way home for dinner. Then I have a glass or two when I get home. Well, that's a lot of sugar, and a lot of fast food if you're eating it twice a day. What do you eat at home? I don't like to cook, so I usually don't eat anything except those Little Debbie snack cakes at home. Those have a lot of sugar too. I thought that all I had to do was cut out Mountain Dew. Now you're saying I can't eat my food or my snacks? What are you suggesting I do? Eat salads for every meal? Why can't you just up my meds? I relate to this patient's eating habits a little too much, probably. I had to explain to an adult that you have to brush all the sides of your teeth. Like, no, just the side that shows when you smile is not enough. And yes, flossing is not just a thing for rich people. Patient comes in at 2 a.m. for insomnia, clearly tweaking her brains out. Heart rate at 200. Can't sit still, bouncing off the walls. I suggest maybe easing up on the snow. But doctor, I love the snow. I was working in GP and had a patient scheduled for an appointment. I looked through his notes to gain an idea of why he may be seeing me, and saw he'd been seen a few times with knee pains and shoulder pains and the like. The guy is in his 70s, so probably just arthritis. I'm thinking I'll do an examination of his sore joints and ask a few questions, prescribe some painkillers, and it'll be a quick one. I call him in and he walks in and sits down and is cheery as anything. What seems to be the problem then, sir? I notice you've had some issues recently with sore joints, I ask him. He then proceeds to tell me about his sore knee. So I check his knee and take a history and it all seems fine. I ask if there's anything else, and he remembers actually his neck is sore too. So I check his neck and nothing untoward to be found there either. At this point, he's like, okay, well, thanks doc, I'll be off then. I say to him, oh, good, glad we could help. And you have no other pains at all before you go? He then sits back down and tells me he's been having central crushing chest pain radiating down his left arm and into his jaw since last night, and has been feeling breathless, and when it happened, he had an impending sense of doom. I know a lot of you won't be doctors here, but I'm sure you all recognize the signs of a heart attack there. He had all the classic textbook symptoms. I called the ambulance and he was rushed to the hospital. Sounds like this dude was taking a heart attack like a champ. My dad told me about an extremely religious male patient who was concerned about his nocturnal emissions. He saw it as an offense to God and wanted to know what he could do to stop it. My dad's response? Well, it's gotta go somewhere, my guy. Nurse here, retired after 27 years on the job. The number of American 20-somethings that don't know if they're circumcised or not is surprisingly high. When one with urinary tract infection symptoms needs to be given a specimen for testing, I ask, are you circumcised? If not, I have to tell them to pull back the foreskin before peeing in the cup. The number of guys who have asked, what's that, is way too many. For the record, I can count the number who were uncircumcised on 2 hands. This one's from my cousin, who's a doctor. He was in his first year in a clinic, and people went there to have an appointment because he was good looking. Elderly ladies loved him particularly, but this is totally unrelated. And the worst case was when this elderly lady goes in with her granddaughter, around 8 years old. She had a severely infected wound on her head. Upon close inspection, he saw the wound crawling with small maggots and the smell was terrible. He was very upset, of course, and asked why didn't she wash the wound wound didn't bring her earlier. She said she thought it would heal with time and was afraid to wash it, lest water enters her brain and kills her. There was also a woman that took her 6-year-old daughter there to check why she still didn't have pubes. You know, old folks are supposed to be wise, but when it comes to medicinal stuff, a lot of the times they're very much behind the curve.
What is your best met the high school jerk/bully as an adult story? I own my own gym and have for a few years now. I received a message one day from a familiar-looking name on the business's Facebook page from a woman asking to come try us out. We set it up, she comes in for an introduction. She's a very, very large and out-of-shape woman at this point. After about 5 minutes of working with her, it hits me that this lady used to be about half her current size and was an absolute bee back in her heyday. I decided not to bring it up to her as she appeared to be struggling in life and came to us in a time of need, and I took it, as I do with all of my clients, as a cry for help. Not to mention, I'm a grown man now, and that seemed pretty silly and insignificant in life today. Months later during one of the classes, I noticed her struggling real hard, so I go over to offer some encouragement. As I lean down to say something to her, I notice she's crying faintly to herself. She looks up at me and quietly says, "Sorry for how nasty I was to you years ago, and thank you for doing this for me." Turns out an old mutual friend told her about my place and she recognized me as the owner and came to me on purpose. No, not a story of revenge or retribution, but she reached out to someone she was terrible to, and today, she's repurposed, and I find it to be quite inspiring. Not quite the same, but about 10 years ago, I caught my dad screaming at the TV. "This friggin' jerk got his own show! He was such a piece of crap when we were kids. He would beat you up for your lunch money, push you for no good reason, take your toys, and based on the way he acts now, it doesn't seem like he grew up much." He was talking about Paul Toodles Sr. from American Choppers. We met at a bar where a large number of our high school class happened to be. He described me as his arch enemy. I realized I hadn't even thought about him in 10 years. She got the whole middle school through junior high to call me gay. I was not gay. She is. She came out of the closet right after high school. I was a jerk in high school. Then I went through the karma-mandated fat phase. Made a guy's day when he saw me at work. I went from pretty dang fine in high school to man the harpoons. I'm also nicer. He came in and said, "Wow, the fanciful unicorn?" And I said, "Yep, does this make it feel better?" and spread out my arms. He responded, "Heck yeah, you were a jerk." I said sorry. I was pretty immature. And then we talked like normal adults. Moved to a new school in 7th grade and was doing fine. Making friends, good grades. Then somehow ran afoul of this bigger kid. He'd been held back a few times. Typical bully, pushed little kids into lockers, loved to torment girls, and ran with a pack of acolytes who adored and aped him. In Texas at the time, if a kid didn't like you, he, quote, called you out, challenged you to a fight after school. Well, Zed calls me out one day because I was a, quote, queer from New York. Clueless me, moved there from said New York where people are civilized, I said, sure, okay. A few days later, in front of his acolytes and a small group of my friends, he proceeds to beat the crap out of me. It was 7th grade, so the damage wasn't excessive, mostly to my pride. Spent the rest of middle school known as one of the guys Zed beat the crap out of. Fast forward about 7 years, home from college and going to the grocery store for mom. Who should I see bagging my goodies but Zed? Taking a look at him, I see a horrible scar running from the top of his head down around the back of his skull and neck and under his shirt. His face lights up when he sees me, and he says in slightly slurred speech, "Hey, didn't we go to school together? We're friends from school, right?" He walks with me out to the parking lot, and as we walk, I learn that he had been hit by a car in high school while biking home one day. Accident required a half dozen surgeries, and it left Zed mentally impaired and a completely different person. He put my stuff in the car, shook my hand for a good 30 seconds, and kept asking me to, quote, come back and see me sometime. I had hated few people in my life to that point, and no one more than him. Almost cried driving home. I felt so bad for him and disgusted with myself for my previous hatred. I ran into somebody in high school that I used to pick on regularly when we were in 1st or 2nd grade. We recognized each other, and I walked up to him. We exchanged a few words, since I hadn't seen him in close to 10 years, and then didn't talk again. But right before we parted ways, I apologized for the way I treated him as a child. I couldn't stress how sorry I was for being a piece of crap to him for no other reason than I felt like it. I still occasionally think about him and where he's at in life. I work in a jail. I've seen the quote, popular kids on the other side of the bars. I ran into my high school bully at a gay bar a few years back. He was my bottom that night. One of mine was this kid named Patrick. One incident led to 2 of my ribs being broken when he jumped on my chest with his knees. Another resulted in a broken eye socket after being kicked in the face by him and 2 of his friends. Eventually, I moved in with my father and didn't see any of my old bullies again, except for a few. Some have been relatively nice, and some are jerks. During high school, I took some martial arts classes, Taekwondo. I was always a larger kid, but too timid to fight back, but martial arts helped me to overcome that. Fast forward to a year or 2 after high school, and I go over to visit my mother. She had moved in with a real jerk who was into God knows what. And guess who's there? Patrick. He's now almost a foot shorter than me, skinny as a middle school girl, and was undoubtedly on meth. I later found out he also did heroin and a myriad of other drugs. We end up talking, and I tell him about how I have sinus trouble because of the beating I got from him and his friends. He laughed. I looked around at my younger brother, who had got very skinny from not eating, and sister, the environment they were in, and right then I made a decision. I turned to my mother and said, I don't give a crap if this is the kind of people you want to be around, indicating the piece of crap next to me, but we are leaving. So I piled my siblings in my car and brought them home with me. They shortly moved in with my father officially and have been much better off since. Patrick made a comment about me, quote, disrespecting him and my mother, and I told him he had no respect for himself, obviously, so who is he to talk like that? He went to hit me and I just stared at him. He dropped his fist quick after I stared him down for what felt like an hour. TLDR, met middle school bully, he's a meth head, was living with my mother, took my siblings and left after verbally sparring with him. Feels good, man. Edit. Wow, this got a lot more karma than I thought. Didn't have time to write this up earlier, but to clear a few things up, he didn't bang my mother. I don't think. He was basically just there all the time like drug addicts are wont to do. My mother was living, and screwing, her boyfriend at the time, whose house it actually was. And the thought of snapping him like a twig did occur to me, but that paled in comparison to what he was doing to himself. If he didn't clean his ways up by now, he's likely dead or in prison. Beating the crap out of him wouldn't have made me feel any better. Plus, it's a lot easier on the knuckles. When I was a kid, I was fat. I used to get picked on all the time by this kid at church named Rusty. He was about 5 years older than me, and every couple of weeks, he would beat me up. I moved away when I was about 14, and thankfully, I didn't have to deal with him anymore. When I went to college, I decided to get my act together and get healthy. To that end, I started taking mixed martial arts. I did it for about 2 years and lost about 40 pounds. When I graduated, I moved back to where I was from and started looking for a new MMA gym. I went to the most reputable one, and who should be there but Rusty? It sounds too good to be true, but I swear to God it happened. He hadn't changed a bit. The first thing he said to me was, "Finally trying to learn to defend yourself, huh?" I had called ahead, and the instructor knew my deal and had arranged for me to come watch. I left my gear in the car. At the end of class, they do free rolling, jiu-jitsu sparring. Rusty comes up to me, having no knowledge that I am the least bit experienced, and starts begging the instructor to let him spar me, so he can, quote, show me the ropes. After all, he's been in MMA for 3 months now, and he never misses a UFC pay-per-view. I went outside and changed. Long story short, we sparred and I choked him out 3 times. Afterwards, I signed up for classes, he grabbed his bag, left, and never came back. This is my favorite story out of everything that has happened in my life thus far. I'm the only person I know that got to beat up my childhood bully as an adult. I was in need for an accountant job, so I searched several websites of businesses. I came across a very worthy company, so I wanted to apply. While I was filling out the form, I looked around the website some more and saw the name of the head chief of the company. I was depressed for the rest of the day. My high school bully, who bullied me every day, is now the head chief of his own freaking business. I'm an accountant. It doesn't always work out. This one is a classic. This girl used to torment me all through high school and middle school, really went out of her way to tear me down. Whenever we had a class together, she would make her extreme dislike for me apparent, and, of course, other kids followed. I couldn't open my mouth without some kind of ridicule. Of course I was miserable, and my dad would try to cheer me up. Don't worry, kiddo. One day, she'll be working at a McDonald's and serving you fries. He actually referred to her as McDonald's for years. A couple years after graduating high school, I went to a Hardee's with my dad, and there was McDonald's behind the counter. I go up to place my order, and before I finish, she says, "You don't remember me, do you?" "Oh, I remember you." "Oh, so would you like fries with that?" "Why, yes. Yes, I would." Way to go, Dad. Called it 9 years in advance. I had an evil 5th grade teacher who made my life terrible for a year. She even instigated a quote, "pick on Stoops day." I saw her at the bar where my friend worked. The day before this, we had invented a shot that tastes like urinal cake smell, Captain Morgan's Lime Bite mixed with Miller High Life. I bought my old teacher and her friends around from across the bar. I made eye contact and raised my shot of Wild Turkey. They gave me a curious look, but took the urinal cake shots nonetheless. My old teacher proceeded to throw up on the bar and get 86th from one of the only bars in town. Screw you, Mrs. Freeman! My sister has since become really good friends with their childhood tormentors. The sad part to me is that the reason she was able to patch things up was that she was a very late bloomer and ended up the kind of popular person they wanted to be friends with. I guess she kind of sold out and became friends with them. How on earth the topic never comes up amongst them, I do not know. Maybe it's her long-term plan to enact revenge, gain trust, destroy them, preferably by dumping pig's blood on their heads at a formal event of some kind. My dad is a very large man. We're talking 6'7", 300 pounds big. He would always tell me this story to cheer me up when girls would be jerks to me. He was pretty chubby in high school, so he played football and was good at it, but just really loved playing basketball. So his freshman year, he tried out for the team and didn't make it. The coach, who was a history teacher at the school, stated his weight as an issue. Fair enough. He worked hard to lose some weight over the summer, blah blah blah. Enter sophomore year. Ends up having the coach as his history teacher. Great, he thinks. He could be a good student and hopefully get on the team. Wrong. This adult man decided to call my father names related to his weight and harass him in front of the class. Not cool, but my dad was too proud and never said anything. Ended up making varsity his sophomore year because of a coaching change. Fast forward about 5 years. My dad was working as a bouncer at a bar in a nearby town to where he went to school. It was a regular night when who walks in? Jerk history teacher. Perfect. He thinks, I'll let it go, be professional, until he recognizes my dad as, quote, the chubby kid who was a coward. My dad looks at him and says, "Sir, I think you've had too much to drink. It's time for you to go home." The coach is saying, No, I'm fine, etc., etc. My dad grabs him by the shirt and says, "No, it's time for you to step outside. You've had too much to drink." The coach decides to swing at my dad, and that's when he loses it. He states, "This is for all the kids you called fat, you piece of crap," and proceeds to beat the tar out of him. A long story, I know, but my favorite by far. My dad and his old bouncer friends always tell it when they got together, too. Ah, revenge. Content warning, this one's pretty violent. My dad did something similar. He grew up as a poorish farm boy in Ireland. All he ever wanted to do was sing in the church Christmas Day show. He bought himself a guitar and taught himself to play, but his headmaster at school wouldn't let him, or any of the family for that matter, perform in it. Fast forward about 30 years, we are back in Ireland for my grandfather's funeral, and we walk into my cousin's pub, and sitting at the bar is this old man. I had never seen my dad so angry before in my life. His face was purple with anger at the sight of this guy. He decked this old man so hard he knocked him off his bar stool and onto his back. My dad crouched down inches from his face and said, "Get out before I punch you for every boy you laid eyes on." This old man looked like he was going to crap himself and ran out of there as fast as he could. I was mortified and felt awful for this old man until my dad told me what this man was doing. He was touching the boys from school. He would take his picks and basically cycle through them as he saw fit. The boys not being touched didn't get away easy either. They were hit with a shillelagh until they bled. My dad hated this man and says that had he found him when he was a drinking man, he may have killed him. TLDR, my dad decked an old man for kitty-diddling his friends. This is kind of morbid. In the 6th grade, I was friends with this kid. I remember one day telling him about an episode of Rescue 911 that I saw, where a guy was driving an ATV in a field and didn't see that there was a barbed wire. Fast forward a year, and this kid started to make really mean comments about me. He would make fun of my appearance and how my family had no money in front of everyone. I'm from an immigrant family, and he would always tell me to go back to my country. Middle school was really tough on me because of kids like him, but held back from fighting him because I knew nothing good would come from it. Fast forward to the summer after high school graduation, that kid was driving an ATV in a field, didn't see the barbed wire, and was decapitated. Weird that 7 years prior, I had described to my future tormentor exactly how he will die. I've got two. I was picked on a lot. About 10 years ago, I got a temporary job at Kroger. It was just stocking shelves, and I had another restaurant job lined up, but needed something for about 2 months while I went through a lengthy hiring process there. Spoiler, I wound up getting an even better job elsewhere and wound up never taking that. So, I go to get my check on my first payday at Kroger and find out the manager at the front is one of the guys who used to bully the crap out of me in high school. He made small talk for a minute. "Hey, how you been? Good to see you." He clearly remembered. Once everyone walked away, he leaned in and said, "Hey, deprecated zero, I'm really sorry for all the crap I did to you in school. I was a stupid jerk kid." I smiled, held out my hand, thanked him, and told him it's all in the past. That was really cool. The other is less cool but hilarious to me. This girl was, quote, the prom queen, basically. The stereotypical mean girl dating the football player. My opinion of her was always that she was just spoiled, worthless, and dumb. I don't usually take joy in other people's misfortune, but I felt schadenfreude in unparalleled amounts the day I walked into Buffalo Wild Wings and saw her standing behind the counter. This is maybe 10 years out of high school. She looks exactly the same. Put on some weight maybe, but hair still done the same. She still looks like she got Effie Trinket to do her makeup, so on. You could tell at a glance that she's never mentally moved past 8th grade. I asked how she'd been, tried to politely talk to her because hey, I want people to do well. She was a jerk. Was like, "Ew, you're deprecated zero." I just raised my eyebrows at her and let it go. Long story short, her boss was my roommate. I asked him about her. Single mother, just got kicked out of her mom's house. He just hired her like 2 weeks earlier. He confronted her about talking down to customers and wound up firing her. Felt like justice. I lucked out and didn't really garner any enemies while in middle school and high school. Mostly because I was the poor kid at a snobby private school in Nashville, Tennessee, until I moved in 9th grade and nobody would talk to me. There was this one really obnoxious boy in one of my classes in 7th grade though. Treated everyone like handmaids, but the parents had money, so nothing was ever really done about it. Ran across his Facebook page the other day. His parents just bought him his second Lamborghini because he wrecked the first one. I try not to hold animosity towards anyone, but I hope somebody keys his car. I was working in a video rental store in Houston, circa 1989, about 2 years after I graduated high school. In comes a girl that had always been awful to me from 10th grade to graduation. She would cross a room just to say something mean, and I had no history with this girl at all. I had never actually said a word to her. All our exchanges were just her saying something mean to me. I didn't even know her last name. I must have reminded her of someone. She comes into the store and sheepishly said that she wanted 3 dirty movies. She didn't seem to remember me. She said her best friend was getting married and she wanted some dirty movies for the bachelorette party. The shop had a small adult room that you had to access by coming behind the counter, but she didn't want to go in there. She asked me to select 3 films. She was squirming with embarrassment as I tried to find out what she was, quote, into, and kind of acted like I thought the films were for her and her alone. She said, "Just grab 3 good ones, I don't care." So I selected 3, all lesbian adult films, and she slunk out with them. I would have loved to see the look on their faces when they popped those tapes in. She returned them through the night drop so she wouldn't have to look anyone in the eye when she brought them back. She rented on her parents' account. I sent a notice through the mail to her parents that, quote, Mona's 3-way slit party had been returned damaged and they owed us $30. Met a kid that was an absolute brute in high school. Thought he was tough stuff. I think I only went face to face with him once over some dumb crap about him threatening a friend of mine. No real fight ever came from it, but he was definitely an enemy. Met him randomly in an airport halfway across the country maybe 4 years after high school. He was the nicest guy. The Marines beat the stupid right out of him. I was playing poker in Atlantic City about 7 years ago, and one of the guys that bullied me, Chad, sat at my table. There's no way he recognized me. I was actually playing on a no-limit hold'em table while waiting for a seat to open in a two-way high-low game. Anyway, I stayed at the NLHE table just to take his money. I played probably 95% of the pots he was in. He was pretty drunk and wasn't very good. I got close to $600 off of him in a little over an hour before he decided to quit. I have no idea what he does for a living, but I am 100% sure he is a big loser when he plays cards.
What's the most WTF thing you've experienced or seen during a flight? I travel quite a bit and have seen a few weird things, but on a recent trip from Vienna to Venice, things were taken to a whole new level. So we're about 20 minutes into the flight when I noticed that a woman sitting across from me had a Persian cat in one of those cat carrier bags. The plane was really warm and the cat was sitting in the bag panting. Well, the lady decided to let the cat out of the bag to let it cool off a bit. After trying to shove the cat's face up into the air vents for a minute, the cat literally freaked out. It was clawing at everything, attaching itself to the seats in front, jumping around, hissing, well, you name it. This thing went crazy. Anyway, after about 5 minutes of more of the same, the cat completely lost it, tried to climb the seat in front and, wait for it, fell over dead. We couldn't believe what had just happened. The owner was trying to shake the cat around a bit to wake it up, but it was a goner. For the duration of the flight, she was sat there holding her dead cat, sobbing quite profusely. That's just awful. I would be completely paranoid bringing a pet on a plane, and not because of anything like this happening, just in general. On a red-eye flight, just as I fell asleep, a woman passed out in the middle of the aisle and hit my leg. I was so doped up on Dramamine, I didn't even realize it and fell back asleep. The flight attendants put an oxygen tank on the floor and put the tank masks over her mouth. Apparently, they used my hand to hold it in place. So when I woke up a few minutes later, I was like, why am I holding an oxygen mask over someone's face? Hey, you're literally out there helping save lives in your sleep. I was on a Gulf Air, as in Persian Gulf, flight as a kid in the late 80s, and a Pakistani family a few rows behind me in coach lit up a barbecue. It was one of those little portable aluminum foil things. You never heard so many flight attendants scream so loud. Yeah, talk about different times. I walked onto the plane and gave the first steward I saw a bag of Hershey's miniatures. This is for the crew. The whole flight, I was given free headphones and all the free drinks I could handle. I tried to pay, but she just kept giving me my money back with every drink. Apparently, chocolate's very valuable in the air. I was about 15 and flirting with a cute girl in the seat next to me. My family was about 2 rows back with my younger brother, and the lady that occupied the third seat pretty much set me up the entire flight. This old lady was the best wingman ever. Anyway, I get up to use the restroom and she says she has to go too. She gets out first and I'm waiting for her to finish up. We've been flirting pretty much the whole flight and she knows that I'm right behind her in line. So she finishes using the bathroom and I walk in. Right there in the toilet is a gigantic unflushed poop. To this day, I have no idea how you respond to something like that. Not really a WTF moment, but kind of funny. So we're flying out of Cleveland and the pilot comes over the PA and gives his welcome, blah blah blah. So we're just leaving Cleveland, we should be in, And then slightly under his breath, but not quiet enough that everyone else didn't hear, he says, "Where the hell are we going?" Long pause. "Chicago." Everyone laughed. Good times and high times. I sat beside a Scientologist who tried to convince me to go into business with him. He wouldn't explain what the business was. How are you going to ask me to invest if you're not even going to tell me what I'm investing in? Come on, buddy. I was flying to Denver on Delta in winter 2009, and they were switching from cash to credit only. They just got their brand new machines to swipe cards, and I was one of the first people to test them out. I ordered a 7 and 7, and it was $7. She took my card, swiped it, and the thing that printed out was $0. I left a $3 tip and thought, cool. About 10 minutes later, she came by and asked if I wanted another. I said, sure, why not? I swiped the card, and another $0 transaction transaction. Bought lunch, $0. So I ordered 4 more 7 and 7s and got hammered for around $20 in tips. I checked my bank account the day after and sure enough, only the tip showed up. I have no idea what happened, but that was one happy flight attendant. Sounds like you did pretty well for yourself too, my friend. A guy died next to me once. On a flight from Maui to Dallas, I was half asleep in the second to last row of the plane. While I was listening to music and dozing, I suddenly heard a really loud, hard thud next to me. I look over and there's a man lying on the ground, completely still. I thought maybe he tripped, but the flight attendant came running and he was unresponsive. She frantically ran up and down the aisles asking for doctors. Luckily for him, the flight was full of vacationing doctors and nurses, all of them in ridiculous clothes. 2 of the doctors who came back were in Hawaiian shirts and golf attire, and the female nurse who came back was wearing a very strappy, revealing blue Hawaiian print dress. The doctors tried to wake the man up, but he was gone. I was surprised to find out just how much medical equipment they have on commercial flights. The docs whipped out a portable defibrillator and shocked the guy, then set up an IV drip for him. I never heard a word out of him or saw him move. Not sure if he actually woke up or not. Our flight was diverted to LA, and when we landed, half a dozen EMT personnel ran onto the plane to pull the guy out on a gurney. Unfortunately for me, this scenario set off a panic attack, and I had to go find a nice spot in the aisle to lie down so that I didn't pass out and cause more problems for the crew and doctors. It was kind of embarrassing. One time, I was the only person on a very big plane from DC to Atlanta. They told me they wouldn't normally fly, but they really needed the plane in Atlanta first thing in the morning. I got great service, by the way. Since then, I've used this as the setting for an erotic fantasy. An older man unsuccessfully attempting to get some action from his wife in the seat in front of me. Honey, I got the blanket in place. My wife was coming to visit me in Africa a few months ago. On some third world airline, a passenger sitting next to her pulls out his thing and starts peeing into a bottle, then hands it to the stewardess who didn't even bat an eye. I'm sorry, is there no bathroom on the plane? I was in an aisle seat on a flight from LA to Austin, Texas. About an hour into the flight, I noticed this awful smell. I look up from my book just in time to see this 70-year-old woman violently throwing up in her lap. Since I'm a sympathy vomiter, I turn towards the people in the other seats to try and avoid doing the same thing. After about a minute of this and the rancid smell of old people vomit, she's led to the bathroom. As she's leaving her seat, she poops herself in the seat. So I get to spend the rest of the flight gagging as this poop and vomit aroma assaults my nostrils. The flight attendants tried to clean it up as best as they could, but it made no real improvement. Ugh, that's awful to have to sit through, but also just kind of feel bad for that lady. She's obviously having a really rough time. While waiting to use the bathroom on the way to Panama, the door somehow opened while this guy was hunched over the toilet, pleasuring himself. At first, I couldn't believe what I actually saw. As his head turned to see the door come open, the most awkward eye contact moment of my life unfolded. He turned to shut the door in a panicked fashion, exposing his junk. At that point, my WTF face became encrusted into my facial features for the rest of the flight, and even the next day. Ever since that time, I can hardly use any bathroom on a plane. I was taking a business flight to Chicago when, about halfway through the flight, a man was walking back to the lavatory but completely passed out and hit the floor next to me. People started chattering and calling for help while this guy pops out of first class and says, "Don't worry, I'm a doctor," and addresses the situation like a boss. It was Dr. Oz. Oh, great. Is there any other doctor on board? On the way to Japan, I look across the aisle and see an old man sitting with an old woman I assume to be his wife. He reaches into his bag and pulls out a large stash of adult magazines and proceeds to sit and look at them for many hours of the flight. I'm sure he says he just reads them for the articles. I was flying Calgary to Houston, which is about a 4-hour direct flight. We were just about 2 hours into the flight, or coincidentally, just about to Denver, when the pilot announced we would have to turn back to Calgary. So around we go and land in about an hour 15. He really cranked it. We touch down and taxi over to the mechanics. They open the cargo door and shut it again. And in 15 more minutes, we were fueled up and in the air and off to Houston. This time it was about a 3-hour flight, full thrust the whole way. Luckily, there was an industry guy behind me, and I overheard him speculating the reason. His idea was that since the airline had paid mechanics in Calgary and probably not in Denver, it would be cheaper for them to turn all the way around to Calgary than pay all the costs associated with landing in Denver. Luckily, it was just a little glitch, and not a true problem, but it was anyone's guess the true issue. I have a friend that's familiar with the inner workings of the plane, and he said that anytime they open the cargo door and unplug a certain cable during maintenance, some switch has to be flipped to reset the alarm system for that door. He said it's an extremely common mistake for that switch to not get flipped after work has been done, and it results in false alarms. All that cost, likely in the tens of thousands, because one guy forgot to flip a switch. I'd be more annoyed at the waste of time, honestly. Just land in Denver, come on. On a flight a few weeks ago, the flight attendant started to make preparations for landing, telling people to put their trays up and whatnot. I noticed the flight attendant loudly speaking to a man in his late 20s or early 30s sitting 2 rows in front of me. "Sir, you need to put your seat back up. Sir, sir." The guy starts spitting blood and convulsing. It sounded like he was choking on the blood with each gasp of air. The flight attendant starts screaming for help, and they make an announcement over the PA for a doctor. 4 passengers and all flight attendants leap into action. Turns out, the lady in the row between me and the sick man is a nurse. Together, they get him laid out in the row with his head in the aisle. He's not responding to their questions, and he's fading in and out of consciousness. We make an emergency landing, 20 minutes ahead of schedule. As we're taxiing, he regains consciousness and tells the flight attendant holding his head that he's sorry for the trouble. We land, paramedics meet the plane and carry him off. He seemed to be stable, but I hope everything worked out for the guy. Yeah, that's gotta be a really scary moment for everyone around. Spitting blood and convulsing is not something that you want happening on a plane. This one happened to my cousin. He was flying in South America, and about halfway through the flight, he realizes he really needs to go to the bathroom. The plane he's on is a tiny prop plane made for tiny people. He's 6'5". He awkwardly climbs over his aisle mates and stumbles and shuffles to the back of the plane. As he's closing the door, the captain comes on the loudspeaker and warns of upcoming turbulence. He thinks, screw it, I really need to pee. He crams himself into this tiny bathroom and manages to whip it out. And right as he starts to pee, they hit a huge bit of turbulence that knocks him off his feet, backwards, through the bathroom door, and flat on his back in the aisle, still peeing straight up in the air. He was completely mortified and managed to get back up, pick up the door, and work himself back into the bathroom. He waited for like 20 minutes hoping no one would have seen it or that they would have forgotten about it by then, but when he went back out to take his seat, he got a standing ovation from every single person on the plane. Ouch. I feel like this story might be a little bit embellished, but I like the visuals here. I used to travel internationally a lot when I was younger and working for a telecom company designing new infrastructure. On one of the trips as we were heading to China, I looked out the window. We were above Alaska and bearing straight somewhere, and the horizon had a huge slice of black, like some weird wedge-shaped cloud that encompassed half the horizon. It was a bright day on the ground or sea below us. The ice was very bright and white, but there was this giant dark wedge encompassing and seeming to take over the earth as you looked out to the horizon. I had the guys next to me take a look out as well, and they were confused at first too. I was really confused for a few minutes. Then I realized what I was looking at in profile and what that black engulfing wedge really was. It was night. We were flying in such a manner that we were surfing the edge of daytime and nighttime at 35,000 feet. And at that moment, if you looked out over the horizon, you saw daytime fading into night. I only saw it that once. It was being in the right place at the right time. Aside from bad in-flight movies, that would be my most WTF experience. That sounds like that would be absolutely incredible to see. I'd love to see photos of something like that. I'm sure you could find it on Google. The The bathroom sink on a Bangladeshi Airlines flight from Thailand to Nepal was clogged and had about 1,000 water bugs living in it. I was on a plane that lost power just as it was throttling up for takeoff. And I don't mean they reduced power to the engines. I mean all the lights went out, the engines shut down, and we were left sitting on the runway for a good few minutes. Somehow, the plane regained power and we taxied to an adjacent tarmac for another few minutes. After this, the pilot announces to the rest of the passengers that they had a small technical glitch and that we're now ready for takeoff. The rest of the ride was uneventful. I mean, yeah, you would want that to be the end of the events. You don't want that happening in the air. I was on a flight home from South Africa after a family vacation. My dad is diabetic, but he usually keeps his blood sugar levels pretty regulated, so I never worried before. Mid-flight, I wake up from a nap and see him slumped over the side of his seat. He was taken to the back of the plane where 3 doctors were examining him. They said his heartbeat went up to 220 or something, which I think means he was about an inch from death. All I remember is seeing my mom and brother break down. I began having flashes of life without my father, and it overwhelmed me. I felt sick to my stomach, imagining what life would be like, when all of a sudden his heart rate stabilized. The doctors on board said that it was a miracle, and I felt so much relief. The plane had to stop in Senegal where my dad was transferred to a hospital. He wanted me to keep going since the semester was starting soon. That flight home alone was terrible. I felt the other passengers watching me the entire time. He's all right now, but every time I get on a plane, I remember that feeling of leaving the whole world behind. I was on a flight from Amsterdam to New York one time, and there was this kid who was running up and down the aisles trying to bite people. As he was heading down the aisle at full speed, a stewardess suddenly pulled the refreshment cart into the aisle right in front of him, and he ran smack into it face first. She said to him, "Oh, sorry, didn't see you coming. You shouldn't run down the aisle like that," or something like that. I know she did that on purpose. It was awesome. Hey, you know what? Someone had to. I went to Vegas with my wife. First, let me say it was an early flight. We got there extra early for check-in, put our bags to the side so as not to get in anyone's way. This 300+ pound greaseball wearing a Hawaiian shirt and shorts comes waddling in with one carry-on bag, remember this as it's important, and knocks over my neatly stacked out-of-the-way baggage. It's also 15 degrees outside, freezing, and 5:15 in the morning. I'm like, whatever, no big deal. Later, we get on the plane. My wife has the window, I'm in the middle, and here comes too fat for the seat Hawaiian guy with his little bag to sit on the end next to me. Great. Believe me when I tell you, this guy smelled like a dead animal covered in throw up and poop. I literally dry heaved when he sat down next to me. The guy had a carry-on bag that he was clenching like it contained something of the utmost importance. Obviously not deodorant. And he was sweating through his thin red flowered shirt while everyone else was bundled in heavy winter jackets. We hadn't even taken off yet, and I was becoming violently ill smelling this guy. I had to stuff my face in my sweater and throw my head into my wife's lap to try and escape the smell. After an hour, the guy became increasingly fidgety and paranoid. This made him sweat more. I can't figure out how a guy who sweated so much was so fat. He was like a walking sauna of used banana hammocks. Finally, the guy got up to use the bathroom, and as soon as he closed the bathroom door, people began ripping cologne and perfume ads out of magazines and rubbing them on his sweat-soaked chair. I kid you not. People were offering their apologies to me for having to sit next to him. And then the stewardess comes over and says, "I'm sorry, the flight is booked. There's nowhere else to put him." And I'm staring at her like, what? I never even said anything to anyone about it. That's when I realized this guy was such a disgusting mess. People were actually rallying around trying to help me. It was the weirdest moment of my life. For the next 5 hours, he made about 20 more trips to the bathroom, and each time, different rows would come over to rub his seat down with cologne. Oh, and guess what was in the bag? Adult magazines. Piles of adult magazines. He took a new one to the bathroom with him each time. I haven't been on a plane since. Yeah, that's gotta be just about the worst person you'd have to sit next to on an airplane. I was on a flight to Chicago. We were supposed to land at O'Hare, but about 30 minutes before landing, they told us it was too icy and we were diverted to Midway. The two are about 26 miles apart. So we land at Midway, we disembark, and as we're leaving the Skyway, a gate agent runs up and tells us we need to get back on the plane. They were now going to take us to O'Hare. We all said, screw it, we'll stay here. She then informed us our bags wouldn't be getting unloaded. We would need to go to the other airport to get them. So about 5 of us out of a full flight of 90 got back on and had to wait about 20 minutes to de-ice the plane, then a 15-minute flight to O'Hare. From the flyer's point of view, this just seems like a complete waste of time. I get that they must need the plane at that airport for something, but come on. Everyone's already deboarded, you got a few people left, just roll with it. The die has been cast. Not my story, but my sister's. She was once on a long-haul flight from London to Hong Kong. During the night, while everyone was sleeping, suddenly a woman let out the most blood-curdling scream. Since this wasn't long after 9/11, everyone was pretty on edge as it was. It turned out that the woman had just had a bad dream. Everyone was pretty annoyed after that. Hey, come on, it's not her fault. She has no control over that. I get that you guys would be annoyed, but come on, give her a break. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.